It's. Okay.
Right. But yeah.
Let's spend some money. Too soon. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Things are.
It still looks like it's not our.
Yeah. Here's a Wi-Fi password, by the way, guys, if you need it. Sorry, daughter. Yeah. Hi. I'm gonna pull that extra chair. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I got the order here. Perfect. Yes, we're gonna call the first private board support mitigation advisory committee meeting to order today on February 1st, 2023 at 1:02 p.m. Great. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time today to get here. I know some of you drove quite the distance across the state to make it. Some of us just had to go downstairs, so it was a little bit easier for others. But nonetheless, thank you. We got a lot to chat about in this meeting. So we're gonna get right to it. So everything going well?
The camera's not working. I don't know if there's a way to turn the camera on.
Oh, it was just a minute, guys. You just have to plug in the USB.
Oh, I do. Okay.
That should help. Good. Yeah. You can hear us though.
Yes.
As much as it's great to see Mark Rembrummer again, that's all I see on my screen. So if there's a way to see everybody there, that'd be awesome.
You know, I was having the same sentiment, Andrew.
Give it a minute. Oh, no.
That's fine. I'll continue.
Yeah, what if?
So we're gonna do a roll call for attendance. So for those who haven't been in the committee, I know some of you have been. Essentially, I'm just gonna go down the list of names. I'll read your name off and just give me an affirmative that you're here, and that will count for that. So we Chad Washington. Here. Christian River.
Here.
Baldwin Dyke.
Here.
Fran Caparata.
Here.
Can you pronounce the last name? Okay, I was right. Please let me know if I butcher it. I don't have an easy one either, but still. Heath Curtis. Here. Andrew Perquet, I think he's online.
Here,
Andrew.
remote.
Okay. Mark Stern.
Here.
Mark Greenbermer. Bammer.
Here.
Wow, loud and clear on that. Jennifer Wyko.
Here.
It is Wyko, right?
Wyko.
Wyko, thank you. Kate Wells. Chris Allen.
Here.
Sarah Gregory.
Here.
This is connected to the power. So it would be. It would just be, I just put this one in. No, that's the one.
Here, with the stand.
So if you go to the, the more button, choose the camera. It's a Logitech one. Should be a drop down.
It's not gonna show.
Really nice. On I think I know the answer. That it?
Yes.
Might help to power on the pieces. Just a little bit.
Gotta
Alright,
make
guys.
gotta make it spicy for your first meeting, Andy.
So a little bit of housekeeping. We do have a quorum, just so for those to know. Quorum is 4 of the 7 voting. We have the 7 voting members in the middle here. We have the ex officio members over here from the agencies. And we have ODFW staff over here. Any public online, please make sure when you do speak that you speak your name, your full name, because we cannot see you on video on the big screen here. So for the record. Your microphones and possibly your cameras. Bathrooms for anyone in the room here, just so you know, bathrooms are out in the hallway. You can make a left. Be installed. Public comment, if we could please just pull up any public comment online to the end of the meeting. That would be great. All right. So we're gonna get into a roundtable introductions here. So let's try to keep it somewhat brief. Just gonna do 2 minutes. You're gonna say who you are. We're gonna start over here with Chris. You're gonna say who you are, your affiliation, and maybe talk about some top goals of the PFA. Something that you hope to get out of it, or for the PFA to be in the next few years. It could be something really brief. It can be a little longer, whatever you'd like. But let's start with Chris over here.
Thanks, Andy. You go by Andy or Andrew?
Andy works.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm super excited to be part of this new committee. Excited to meet some new folks. Excited to see some old folks that I not old. But some folks that worked with seen for a while. My name is Chris Allen. I work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for our Oregon Fish and Wildlife Office, often referred to as the state office. Just to delineate us from our regional office, that's also important. I manage our aquatic technical division. Small team of folks that work primarily on T&E related issues, statewide. On paper, our jurisdiction, my team is Wyoming Basin and North Columbia. But in reality, we really work statewide and supporting high offices, sub offices, and the brand reporting road. A lot of the work that my team under the Endangered Species Act, T&E related, listing recovery plans, five-year reviews and species status assessments and Section 7 consultation, stuff like that. But I'd also say that more and more of my team's work is what I refer to as pre-listing conservation. And that is conservation planning and conservation implementation of actions to support species that are either state sensitive or on our what we refer to as our species of concern list. Essentially, species that are on kind of a watch list to ideally prevent the need for additional listings in the state. So species like a suite of freshwater mussels in Oregon, Pacific lamprey, western pond turtle, a number of non-listed native non-game fish on the east side of the state. Spending a lot of time on that type of conservation, which I think is really encouraging. I've been with our office for 23 years. Before that, a little seasonal time with ODFW, some consulting, a few years with the Oregon Natural Heritage Program, which at that time was housed under TNC. It was a long term. And I guess the last thing I'd say is I'm a relatively new member of OWEB's board as well. Very excited and honored to be a part of that. Happy to see Mark here representing OWEB staff on the committee. And then in terms of private forest accords and this mitigation advisory committee, I don't have a lot of experience working in kind of the forest plan or state forest type issues with my work within the Fish and Wildlife Service. So I'm just really excited to be a part of moving the private forest accords forward along with the HCP and then this mitigation funding program associated with it. So that's enough rambling from me.
I'm Jennifer Weichel, and I'm with the Oregon Department of Forestry. And I'm a wildlife biologist with our agency, but currently I'm working pretty much full-time, maybe a little more than full-time on the habitat conservation plan for the private forest accord. So I'm coordinating that effort. So happy to be on this committee and very keenly interested on, you know, where it goes. We're sort of in a weird place, I think, because usually the mitigation stuff comes tail end of an HCP, and we're, you know, this committee as well as a couple others are already standing, and we're still drafting HCP and still fairly early phases. So it's going to be a lot of back and forth, I think, and just communication on making sure we get this program characterized correctly in the document. And as far as, you know, what I'm looking for this, I'm besides just the coordination interests. I mean, it's always really fun when you can be part of putting money towards good projects. And so very excited to see what we end up funding.
I'm Kate Wells. I'm the Willamette branch chief for NOAA Fisheries out of the Portland office. I'm also currently covering the Oregon Coast branch after the previous branch chief retired about 1.5 years ago. So I've been covering that since then. This is one of 4 active HCPs that we have going on in my 2 geographies, including the Elliott State Forest, the Western Oregon State Forest, or the Elliott State Research Forest, and the Western Oregon State Forest, and then we have a little one for Port Blakely, and then the private forest accord. So a lot of HCP work going on in my world right now. So Ken Kratz and I are doing the best that we can to cover the private forest accords. He's really the expert in this. I'm still learning. I don't come from a history of HCPs. So I was really thrown into it with all 4 of these going on at one time. But it's been exciting and stimulating to meet all these new folks and to see all the good work and potential that can come from these agreements and the permitting process and everything that goes into it. So I really look forward to seeing what kind of projects we can fund through this committee and see what can happen to boost stewardship of NOAA Trust resources, especially. And thank you for being here, for having me here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Gregory. I am currently the Umpqua Watershed District Manager for ODFW. So I supervise staff that work from the Cascades down to the coast, which is pretty cool. Before taking this position about 1.5 years ago, I was a wildlife habitat biologist. So I have a pretty strong technical background in evaluating effects and impacts to terrestrial habitats. I'm getting my feet wet, so to speak, in the fish world. Kind of got thrown in the deep end the last year with a lot of fish issues. We can talk more about that offline if you'd like. Some of the staff that are under me are PFA staff, habitat staff. They work in the mitigation field. So I'm just happy to offer whatever I can to this group and get to know you all and build a strong team. I was also on an OWEB review team for several years too out of Central Oregon. So yeah, anyway, nice to meet you all.
What was your name again?
Sarah Gregory. Yeah.
My name is Heath Curtis. I'm with Hampton Lumber. I'm an attorney there, and I was previously with the Oregon Timber Industry Trade Association, OFIC, and before that I worked for Stoll Reeves, which is a big law firm in downtown Portland. I'd style myself as mostly like a real estate and environmental attorney. Relevant here, it may be interesting to know that I was on one of the negotiating teams in the PFA process. And more than that, I was in the little room when Kate Brown stepped on my neck and pulled my arm around my back and said, I think I can deliver the services and save money if the landowners will show up with their share. And she had suggested, insisted in fact, on the levels that are described in the legislation. I couldn't make that commitment alone. I was like, gosh, Governor, we'll try. And so we went back to our room and literally at like 11:30 at night on a Friday night, we all called CEOs around the country, quite literally. And everybody was like, all right, I think we can do this. We had done some calculations in advance. And so we said, okay. And here we are. I would say I have two goals for this grant program. One is to fully offset the impacts of incidental take under the Private Forest Accord Habitat Conservation Plan. The second goal that I have for this program, is I feel like the industry and the environmental groups don't get a lot of opportunities to sit down and kind of work together on common cause. And I think that this is a really good outlet for that. And in fact, if I had my way, it kind of came together clumsily at the end. This would be an even bigger group and involve more of the players in that conversation. Maybe that will come with time, but it's a big amount of money. Certainly from the industry side, we're taking this very seriously, and I feel very privileged to be in this position. And I do genuinely hope that this is a place where we can meet in common cause and make substantial investments on behalf of Oregonians.
My name's Bob Antoni, and until recently I was working for the Wild Salmon Center. I'm still doing a small contract for them that includes paying attention to this. I also was part of the Private Forest Accord negotiation, but on the part of the conservation group. I'd say my top goal for this mitigation fund is really to help us be successful in getting a take permit and keeping the take permit and having that be a robust HCP that people feel like is working and is justified in part by the mitigation funds that we're able to spend on this. I also, like Heath, hope it can be a place where there's some collaboration and conversations across interests that sometimes don't happen naturally enough or easily enough. And so as I look around here, there's really a great group of people, and I thank you all for being here today to be part of this.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Stern. Nice to see everybody. I'm a member of the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund Advisory Committee, which is hence my role or reason for appointment to this group here today. I was not involved in any of the long efforts of the Private Forest Accord group that all of you were involved in. Thank you for all your effort for the periodic updates from Bob. I worked for the Nature Conservancy in Oregon for a long time. My background is a wildlife ecologist. I spent 15 plus years in the Klamath Basin working on all the different issues down there, and then recently led TNC's Oregon Forest Program for the last decade or so. So I come to it with that background. I suppose two things I'd like to see out of it. One is I really am going to be paying attention to see how OCRF and the Private Forest Accord can support each other, what the synergy can be. One group can fund something that supports the other effort and bring those things along. So I'll be looking at it through that lens a little bit. And then similar to the comments that both of you just suggested, I guess I'd like to think of it, it is technically a mitigation committee, but I'd like to think of it as sort of a forest resiliency and aquatic species resiliency effort. It's really, how do we layer these things together to bring about good outcomes for Oregonians, whether it's a timber from the fisheries perspective or clean water and drinking water. There's a lot of things to bring to the table for a lot of people.
Chad Washington, I'm with Nuveen Natural Capital. I'm the U.S. Forest Policy and Certification Manager. And we are signatories on the PFA. As far as the way I would define success of this grant program would be, well, I can't ever get out of this kind of fiduciary responsibility. I'd like to make sure that there is transparent and efficient deployment of this fund to truly benefit the species that we're here to try to benefit with as little overhead or additional costs. Really put money on the ground in a way that every Oregonian can feel good about, because at the end of the day, the big pool of this is coming from Oregonians' pockets. That's really important to consider. Another piece that I would just reiterate what Pete, Bob, Mark have all said is that this is an opportunity to take conversations that have, historically been, let's say this or that type of situation, and reframing that to be, why not this and that, and build some bridges around common goals and objectives between groups that maybe traditionally haven't been able to see what those common goals are. So I think this will be an opportunity for that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Frank Catherine, wildlife biologist, consulting wildlife biologist. I own my own company out of transitioning to Scappoose, Oregon, but I've been in Hillsborough, so very excited to be moving to Scappoose. It's just fun to say. So I've been working as a biologist in Oregon for a long time, started my business in 2010, really with the focus of just my passion has always been to make a difference for wildlife in the state. And so I work primarily, do a lot of different things, but primarily with the timber industry. So I work with a number of timber companies to help work on their wildlife management plan and then implement those. So I have influence now of about 800,000 acres from Washington all the way down through Oregon to the California border. So I feel pretty good about that. So that's been exciting. So I just really, the focus is to manage intentionally for wildlife in the same way that we manage intentionally for forestry. And then I can't say it any better than my colleagues here to my right about the goals. So the only thing I would add is that, so my role in this committee is to represent small woodland owners. So my family, we are small woodland owners. We have about 400 acres. My dad could give you the exact, it might be like 400.276 or something like that, but I'm just going to round. It's about 400 in 4 different patches in Oregon. We've paid very close attention to the private forestry accord with slightly different perspective than some have. And so just want to look out for the interests of the small woodland owners in this conversation. And I'm just super excited about collaborating with everyone and, looking for projects around the state that makes a difference for wildlife they call Oregon home.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Rivard. I'm the Oregon Director for Trout Unlimited. And like Keith and Bob, I had the pleasure of being one of the negotiators for the PFA. In terms of goals, as others have said, I think there's just a huge opportunity to both secure and maintain the HCP, which I view as something of huge benefit for all Oregonians. And then specifically to this mitigation program, I think thoughtful mitigation can achieve so much more than almost any other action, because you have the opportunity to do the project that has the highest potential leverage on the system, as opposed to necessarily just looking at the exact site of some other activity. And so I think what I'm most excited about being here is this chance to really leverage the huge investment industry's making on their lands and make sure that we address other things to get the greatest uplift possible out of the investment industry's making there. So really happy to be here and support that. And like Keith said, there was a lot of conversation about having a really happy, positive space for all of the parties to come together and do some good work together. So also excited just to maintain relationships and be a part of that.
I am Debbie Colbert, and normally I am the Deputy Director for Fish and Wildlife Programs, wearing a little bit of that hat today, but during our long session, I actually step away from that day-to-day work and do the government relations work for the agency. And Davia will introduce herself. She's actually the acting Deputy for Fish and Wildlife. But honestly, I just couldn't resist the opportunity to be here with you today. We're really pretty honored and excited that the authors, the governor, the legislature trusted us with this fund. And, you know, how often do we all get to start something from the very beginning and create it from the ground up? And I'm pretty blown away by how fortunate we are to have this group of folks, all of you, to be in that ground up building what this will be. Just, it's pretty exciting. And a lot of you, I mean, just so many big jobs that you all have outside of this work. And so please know that it's very much appreciated that the time that you are going to be devoting to this effort with us. And I just can't wait to see the positive impacts that we can have on the ground for species and the outcomes that you can deliver through this funding opportunity. And just feeling very grateful to all of you to be a part of this.
And hi, everybody. I'm Davia Palmieri. I'm the acting Deputy Director for Fish and Wildlife Programs during the legislative session. And so just to add on what Debbie said, I think we, the department and Director Melcher, who can be here, are just so grateful for your time, for the work that many of you put into the negotiations to get here and the trust in the department to stand this up. I think it's a really great opportunity after that kind of hard negotiating to really look to the impact that this can have and working together to actually make cumulative positive impact on the landscape together is really exciting. And I think for me, you know, over the last few years, the department has really honed in on focusing on climate adaptation with everything that we do and all the resources we have. And so there's been a lot of effort to look at the landscape and try to find those places on the landscape where the actions that we can take for conservation are going to have the most uplift for species in the long term. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for you all to help do that here. And I'm just here for a few minutes and then Debbie can have her hat all the way on.
I think we need to actually make some hats. Hey, everybody. It's so nice to finally meet everybody in person after having phone calls and Teams meetings. And so I appreciate everyone making the journey. Speaking of new things, Habitat Division is a relatively new thing within the agency. We're very excited, and as Debbie said, very honored that the Private Forest Mitigation Fund was placed into Habitat Division, and very excited that we've got Andy on board here to lead us on this adventure. And it is really exciting to be involved in something at the ground up because we can design it the way we can start with a vision and then chart a course together for where we want this to go. And so, of course, as the division administrator, like my goals are that I'm thinking about the building of this grant program and how we really need it to be transparent for the public. We need to be accountable for what gets spent and is it achieving the outcomes that we want it to be achieving? Is it equitable? I mean, those are the things that are rattling around in my mind, you know, in terms of the program side. But I love, Mark, that you brought up, yes, it's a mitigation fund, but it's nice to spin it in terms of it being an opportunity to improve forest resiliency and aquatic species conservation. So I like that spin, and that's what I'll adopt as one of my goals too. But yeah, I'll be the square administrator, constantly reminding everyone of the accountability and the sideboards and the need to build something that's transparent and sustainable for the long term, we hope. Do you want to introduce yourself, Sarah?
Yes. Hi, I'm Sarah Sapienza. I was the Habitat Division Office Manager, and today I actually started as the Fish Division Office Manager.
I'm fine. Thanks for helping us today, Sarah. Really appreciate
Thanks. Did you call on Mark too?
Yes.
Should be able to hear him.
Mark, can you hear us?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry I'm not there in person today. I appreciate having the flexibility though to Zoom in today. It's been kind of a hectic travel schedule the last couple of weeks, but I plan on attending in person in the future. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces and names. Andrew, I think I haven't seen you this much in years, so it's great to just, you're almost like my wallpaper right now on my computer, but anyways, my name is Mark Grenbemmer. I work with the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and I'm one of the regional program representatives. I'm located down in Southwest Oregon and call Medford home. I've worked with OWEB since the beginning when it became a state agency in 1998. And before then, I worked with the Governor's Watershed Enhancement Board. And before that, a little known program known as the Oregon Watershed Health Program. And prior to that, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So I've been down here quite a bit, and I've had a lot of experience working with agencies and nonprofit groups and other stakeholders in developing projects, doing assessment and strategic planning, putting together applications, and of course, just managing those applications. And I'm really looking forward to bringing that experience to help the group, as well as learning from everyone. I've had the privilege of being involved in a lot of different project types and a lot of different efforts. Originally, I was on one of the implementation team for the Oregon Plan for Salmon and Watersheds. I served a stint as the state liaison to the Southwest Provincial Interagency Executive Committee under the Northwest Forest Plan, and just really excited to be here. Happy to bring whatever experiences I can to help, and looking forward to learning from you all as well. So.
Thanks, Mark. Andrew, are you able to go ahead?
Sure. Hello, everybody. And like Mark, I wish I could be there in person today, but I already had a personal trip booked to visit some family down in the Bay Area. So I'm in San Francisco today. And fortunately, Andy goes by Andy and I go by Andrew, so there will be no confusion there. I live in Portland, and I am a consultant with a small group called AMP Insights. And as Mark and other folks in the room that I've had the pleasure of working with over the years know, my work has really been focused on water and in-stream flows more specifically. I was the executive director of the Oregon Water Trust for 9 years, which is when I first met Mark working in the Rogue Basin, and Mark Stern as well. And after 9 years there, I went to work for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, first as the director of the Columbia Basin Water Transactions Program, and then after 10 years of that, 6 years as the director of NIFWIF's Western Water Program. And so it was not because of my forest experience, but I suspect because of my grant making experience that Kristen Rivard first reached out to me and said, might you have any interest in participating in this group? And after I learned more about the good work you all that were involved in the legislation and the agreement did, I was pretty inspired to help. And so one goal I have, frankly, is to learn about forest management and projects that can benefit the industry and the resources that exist in the forests, and then, also bring my experience as a grant maker and working to achieve conservation outcomes around when I was at NIFWIF's Western Water objectives to the group, and just also looking forward to meeting the folks here that I haven't met before and working with folks that I've known for years and years. So I will definitely look forward to being in person in the next meeting, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time to share. I know it's important that we listen to each other and understand that we all kind of revolve around the same goal, same idea to collaborate across the aisle and conserve the resources of our forests for current and future generations. It's an amazing set of diversity here, and expertise, mindset, where you're coming from. I feel like by the time we got across the whole table, we've already created half the grant when it's come for our time. There's this amazing idea. I'm Andy Spurka. I'm the Private Forest Corps Grant Coordinator. And introduced myself earlier, I might have for anyone online. You know, and I'm coming in at the end of this. I'm coming in after all the negotiations got said, those got passed. Arguably the easier side of it all. I see my role as helping shepherd this. Some of what Sarah was saying, helping frame the conversation, making sure that it's fair and equitable, and that we can get the stuff out. That's everyone's goal. We have an amazing opportunity to collaborate. Really kind of, you know, as they say, meet the moment for this funding. It's a tremendous amount. Excited to get going on it. With that, we're already behind schedule and we're only on agenda item number 2, which is always fun. But it's always important to hear your voices, you know, you can't ever cut that off. So with that, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. I'm going to introduce Debbie Corver, the Deputy Director. She's going to come up and present on this item. So feel free.
Yeah, actually, can I just hang out here?
You can. I can give you this. No.
Okay, great. So just in terms of kind of establishing some good grounding for all of you as you start to build this amazing program, we wanted to make sure that, and some of you could probably give a presentation, you're so experienced with kind of public meetings and ethics and those kinds of things. But just make sure that we level set everybody's understanding of the committee in the context of some of Oregon's laws that will govern your work. So, okay, let's see if I can do this. And honestly, this is not going to be the funnest part of anything. Like, it's important. Okay, so how do I do that?
Right button. Oh, keep going. Go.
Okay, so because you will be making recommendations to our Fish and Wildlife Commission, who is the governing body of our agency, you, by virtue of playing that role, are public officials, and you are a public body under the definition of Oregon laws. So that means that the same kinds of things around public meeting laws that apply to our commission apply to you. So what does that mean? It means that you can only make a decision when there's a quorum of the committee present. It means that you cannot deliberate in private as a quorum. And really, this is something that can be difficult. So many of you have relationships. And so I think there'll be a little bit of learning around this. But from our perspective, if in doubt, just be really careful. What does that look like? Side conversations, emails. Sometimes you may go, but I'm only talking to Mark. It's just Mark and I. That's not a quorum. You don't know what Mark's going to do, right? And so there's actually even a bill to codify serial deliberations not being allowed. And there's already been court cases, but Keith is probably more of an expert on than I am.
It's funny that you say handy DOJ resource up there. So it is in fact a handy decision.
Yeah. Well played. And so again, this is not to make you feel like nervous or not feel like you can't do your jobs effectively. But and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. If you're ever in doubt, talk to Andy, talk to me. You know, we'll support you, and you'll get more used to these requirements. But especially since you'll be making really important decisions, just, you know, err on the side of caution in terms of side conversations or sub quorum of you talking about grants that you would be making decisions on. Your meetings will be open to the public. Now, one thing we do remind folks of, public meetings law is not a public participation. Okay, it just means that the public has to have an opportunity to know when you're meeting, where you're meeting, and what you're meeting about, and to participate in the sense that they can listen. It doesn't require that you take comments. That is something that you all will kind of be thinking about. How you want to engage the public is really your decision, and some of the things that you'll develop as a group. It has really strict requirements, as I said, about kind of noticing the public with basic information. You know, you'll really depend on your staff, Andy, to make sure you're meeting those notice requirements. It's reasonable notice. So, you know, for the most part, you're gonna know what your plan of work is and you'll be able to meet those requirements. Letting folks know kind of what's on the docket and when and where. So any questions on that? Kind of the basics of public meetings and being a public body.
Debbie, the only thing I would add is a quorum is 4 of the 7 voting members, just to make that clear for you guys. It's not the whole with ex officio, it's 4 of the 7 defined in the bills.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a really good point. Okay. I'm in charge. Okay. So, you know, a lot of times folks say, okay, well, then what makes it a public meeting? Again, just 2 or more of you with the authority to make decisions could trigger public meeting laws. So again, be very cautious. What isn't a public meeting? You know, if you're doing, so let's say a subset of you, we say, hey, can you subset go and kind of find information about other granting approaches that have been used? And bring it back to us with no recommendation. You could go do that work because you're not making a recommendation to a public body. You're just going and doing fact finding. So there's a lot of nuances here. And again, for the most part, you're not going to have to worry about that. You'll have staff that are helping to guide you through all this, but just there are some nuances involved. Okay, so then just to kind of belabor this, what about just hanging out at a social gathering? That's not a public meeting. So let's say y'all started doing things where you were like, hey, we're going to start meeting and we're going to go on tour today. We're going to view some of our projects, or I don't know how you will kind of develop your plan for operating. And you might want to have dinners together. That's not a public meeting. But you really do need to be careful about kind of, you know, it's human inclination to kind of process what you've seen, process what's coming the next day. And so again, just be very cautious about that kind of stuff. But we do want you to work well together. So that's kind of like, it's great if you're doing those kinds of social gatherings, if you're going out on tours, because that all helps you to be a high functioning group. You just have to be careful about how you are treating content that would ultimately relate to a decision, of course. Same thing with workshops and tours. You know, we will always be helping to guide you on whether those are going to be public meetings and how we handle that piece of it. And if you have any questions, you can always ask.
To your prior slide about the 2 or more, I mean, where you don't have a quorum, 2 members of a body, they talk to each other about business all the time. That happens regularly. Is that, that's not a public meeting per se.
It really, it depends on to what end. And so that's why there's a lot of nuances here. If it becomes a serial conversation.
Of course,
Yeah.
if they like try and coordinate a decision across members.
Yes.
But like 2 members of the Board of Forestry talking to each other, that may be happening daily presently.
And 2 members that actually are going to be bringing back something with a recommendation. So again, our philosophy as an agency, kind of in the spirit of transparency and kind of the highest standards, we just say be extremely careful, especially if you're having side conversations about things that you will be making decisions on. Because sometimes how that comes out is, well, Christina and I were just talking about this, like you're now making a decision. Well, you know, when Christina and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, what does that signal to the public, right? So you just have to be very cautious, and we really take a pretty high bar in terms of that public perception around side conversations. And
Debbie, if we're out on a tour, I was like, wow, Kristen, that was a really interesting project, and I really like this component. That's not making a decision. It's not, that's totally appropriate. Kind of debriefing after a tour.
yeah, I mean, again, you're all just amazing people. You're really smart. I think you kind of know the intent here and the caution that we're providing. But you have to do your work and you have to be effective together. And so just from the outset, we're just trying to have you have a heightened awareness of that. Especially if you haven't been a public official in the past. It's a little bit different. Freaking me out. That was when I was up there. It's not- that's- Again, we're just trying to kind of set the bar, just so that you understand, and especially since this is a really big deal for all of us. And if you have questions, that's what we're here for, and that's what Andy's here for.
Tours may be announced as public.
Oh, yeah,
so
for the most
our
part.
commission tours are.
Yeah, and for the most part, your tours will be open to the public. If you choose to go that, I mean, we don't even know whether y'all are gonna wanna do those kinds of things yet. And just to be assured, we have a lot of advisory committees with our agency. And they've been around for a long time, and we're really good at this. We're really good at supporting our advisory committees. And it's not as hard as it may sound. Okay. So one thing to understand is that because you are a advisory to our public governing board, you are public officials. So you need to be mindful of Oregon ethics laws around, conflicts of interest and things like that. And what this is going to boil down to. So first of all, you need to be really very cautious in terms of accepting gifts as public officials. If it's, and again, this is the kind of thing where if in doubt, just let us know and we can connect you with staff at the Oregon Ethics Commission about whether something you or a family member are receiving is by virtue of your office, and they can give you advice. In fact, they're the only ones that can give you advice. This is all sounding so much scarier than I really want it to, and I feel like afterwards, Fran and I are going to have to spend some time together.
No, it gives me feel, so we're good there.
There is a threshold of the value of a gift. But again, we really take this stuff seriously. It's so sad that as volunteers, you're kind of giving of your time and your expertise. And then we have to kind of like lecture you on like, oh, don't take gifts, but it's there for a good reason. And so if in doubt, we will connect you with folks to talk through any kind of conflicts on the ethics law. This one, I'm going to call you all our advanced users on conflicts of interest going into this, okay? So, as members of the committee, you will need to be mindful of conflicts of interest, whether they are potential, so things that could present a conflict of interest, and ones that are actual conflict of interest. And when you look at the statute that sets you up, just the fact that we have to have authors on this who are also some of the very same groups that we would hope would be pursuing this funding. Mm-hmm. We know from the outset, it's going to present some interesting scenarios for all of you and some of your organizations. And again, this is one where we don't have to invent the wheel. We can look to our folks at OWEB, and we already are talking to them. And they have some great guidance in place for how their technical advisory committee members who have the same scenarios, how they deal with them. And so just know that we're anticipating working closely with you to help you understand, like, okay, so here's one where your organization's in the pool for consideration. How do you handle that in terms of discussion, declaration of potential or real conflict, voting on that one versus voting on the other ones. So we are already reaching out to OWEB and looking at some of the procedures they have in place to help guide you. Anything to add on that front?
No, I think we'll just kind of work through it on a case by case basis, but it is nice to be able to look to OWEB, who has a process for that person would recuse themselves from consideration of their grant, but not have to recuse themselves from that whole round. Right. So we'll confirm that is the same model, but we're actively looking into that.
That was an easy one to identify. you're directly benefiting. Ones that may also come up would be like a grant to a watershed council that was then going to make improvements on your ownership, right? So just if you're over communicating, you probably say.
Yeah, again, it's that same kind of err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
It's also why I'm saying y'all are gonna be some advanced users on this particular aspect.
Right.
I feel great.
The other thing I just want to mention, and this is gonna also present some interesting scenarios for you all. Again, as public officials, when you are wearing your hat as a committee member, you really have to be careful in terms of campaigning or lobbying. So essentially, the same rules that apply to me apply to you when you are wearing that hat. What you do in your private business is completely different. But you have to be careful. If people are perceiving you to be representing the committee, it could have a negative impact. You know, whether it's a true issue or not.
That could come up.
I think that could.
I fully anticipate lobbying on behalf of these dollars for this committee.
I know, advanced users. And so we're gonna have to really work closely with the governor's office on this, because perfect example of this is that we now have a governor's recommended budget for our agency, just came out. Sarah's gonna tell you a little bit of details about, if you haven't already heard, where it landed for this fund. We cannot, as an agency, lobby outside of the governor's budget. And if you're us, you can't. So we are gonna have to work closely with the governor's office and say, okay, when you're wearing your author's hat, how do you distinguish? You know, and how do we work this in the Capitol? If, say, you are going to be pushing for full funding or a different level of funding. So again, we are facing some interesting scenarios with the advisory committee. And I think it's all, we can figure it out. And we can do it in a way that I think our governor's office is comfortable with, that helps you not, like, you need to still be able to do your day jobs, right? And so more to come on that particular front. So, and I think the same thing, I mean, there's the funding piece, but there's also legislative pieces. And I think that it's just gonna really depend on us staying in touch and communicating well together. Because it just doesn't hurt for you all. Like, let's say there's something that's a legislative bill out that could impact the kinds of things you run, right? And you feel strongly, your organization feels strongly. I think the best case scenario is that you and I talk and you just go, hey, this is where TU is coming from on this. And, you know, we're going to be having conversations. And then we kind of talk about, like, how do we manage that? Maybe where's the governor on it? And again, that's not to say you can't do your job, but like, let's just be coordinated a little bit, maybe than we wouldn't.
Yeah, we should be involved in this capacity in development of the governor's recommended budget. Yeah, I think that'd be good, as if we were on the front end, just like you're like one of the governor's people.
We have been saying that, and we actually feel very relieved that in what we're seeing, because we really not as optimistic. So what else? Okay, that's that. I don't know why that's showing up the way it is, but again, if you are like representing this committee, no positions on bills, and you have to be really clear, you know, in terms of which hat you're wearing, and we will coordinate on that front.
What's the second bullet there? It's a statement, but it's not guidance.
Direct inquiries from legislatures or their staff or requests for information on bills of the legislatures.
So let's say somebody reached out to you, Mark, and said, hey, I understand you're on the subcommittee and I'd like to learn more about XYZ as a legislator. Pass them off to me.
Okay.
right? Like, because you don't speak, we're gonna talk about this. You as an individual do not speak for the committee, right? And so if you can direct legislative inquiries to me when someone is asking you as a member of the committee. Okay? Because then you are already identified as wearing your ODFW hat. If you get an inquiry, I mean, I just feel like we're gonna.
This is all of the anxieties.
Yeah.
Sarah and Andy,
I actually think it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's good for us all to start from the outset with our eyes wide open about some of the nuances that we're gonna be managing. If they reach out and they're like, hey, what does TU think about, this, requirement that we're gonna have on fish passage, right? And, I know it's playing out on this one particular area, and it's just clear that you can bucketize it, that nobody is, conflating it with your role on this committee. You're just doing your job, right? And so that's kind of the nuance there. What do you think?
Well, I'm trying to process it a little bit because, obviously I'm not working for another entity. So there's sort of this role and just me. And I have existing relationships with some of the legislators who might call up and say, hey, we've talked before, what do you think about the pop that OCRF got? And so I'm trying to understand, I'm not going to answer it on behalf of OCRF, but if they're asking me, what do I think about that? And where's that line?
So if I were you and I got that call, I mean, it can't hurt to say, well, I can't speak for the department or OCRF, and I'm sure the department staff can talk to you more about the governor's budget overall. But here's all the great things I think OCRF has done. And so you're not trying to kind of go and at a minimum it needs this, but you're sharing good information without pushing too hard on advocating for a specific, especially when it comes to funding. I think we have to be careful on that front.
There's all the good things we could do if we had more money.
I think that you could get creative, Mark. I know you can. I know you can. Yeah. So. Your priorities. Yeah, I guess.
We can follow up later, I guess. It's only intend to use the "we had a deal" line.
I feel like that's really wearing your author's hat, and I feel like, again, we'll talk to the governor's office on this particular aspect. But outside of that aspect, does that help, Mark? Here's the rub on the funding piece. The governor has decided what she's going to put forward and what her priorities are. And frankly, it's not helpful. I mean, there are plenty of stakeholders that are having conversations about priorities on a lot of different fronts. And I'm sure you can sympathize with the governor's office in terms of advisory committees that are pushing on just one area. So if you are representing or appear to be representing the advisory committee, you just have to be more careful. Because it is our governor and we're all, she's the boss.
No, I get that and I appreciate that. I'm just sort of trying to play out the conversation.
Yeah, you could not be a more challenging group. But in this area, but honestly, that speaks to how amazing you are, because you are on the front line of so many things that are happening that are good for conservation. I mean, so it's a good problem to have, and we'll figure it out. So just wanted to finish again, just thinking about kind of, especially all the work that some of you have done to get to this point, and then thinking kind of forward. Just never hurts to just remind yourselves that as individual advisory members, remember that you as individuals don't have any authority. Your power comes from you as a group. right? And you really think about, kind of your interactions. So, and maybe this won't come up very much for this committee, but just like a scenario where you're like really, really committed on a project that just got funded. And you have strong ideas about the details about how it should be implemented. Probably not your role to follow up with the grantee and be giving them specific direction, right? That would be kind of stepping over, right? The line, because you don't have that kind of authority as an individual. But you can't underestimate from an appearance what you will look like as that you have an authority. I mean, this is not a made up example, but a Fish and Wildlife Commissioner calls a stakeholder and expresses an opinion. That stakeholder thinks they just got direction. And we have to tell our commissioners that all the time. And it's the same thing for y'all. Just never underestimate the power dynamic and the authority that you appear to hold and just how people might take a call from you. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah, I know that OCRF is relatively new as well, but to date, has there been many issues crop up similar to what we're?
Honestly, Sarah could speak to this better than I could, but not that I'm aware of. I feel like it's gone really very smoothly with OCRF, and that's why I feel like, we're giving this a lot of attention today, but I think it'll sort itself out and you'll get used to kind of where there are pinch points that we have to kind of troubleshoot versus just getting the great work done. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I think OCRF hasn't really run into that as much. I think, the PFA is has more complexities to it. And the budgeting piece probably touches both groups. So far, it hasn't been an issue with OCRF, but every budget cycle, there's been more and more money. So that's been pretty easy to embrace.
So there are things
Debbie, and this is Andrew. I just had a quick question. I'm not nearly as engaged in Salem politics or policy as probably others or some others are on this group. So I'm not too concerned about it for myself, and maybe ignorance is bliss on this, but are we going to get into the process and politics associated with the creation of this fund just as background, or is that not really relevant, particularly given what you just presented?
So, Andrew, are you thinking of just kind of being more grounded in terms of the PFA, the private forest agreement?
Yeah, like how we got here, particularly given that some of the members of this group were involved in that and sort of being grounded in a way that I'm not currently.
Good question, Andrew. So yeah, I do plan that another meeting, pending when we nominate the chair and vice chair to discuss when that is. But some members here are authors. I would lean on to help give that presentation. News to them now, probably. But yes, we will have more of a background and full roundabout of how did we get here? What was the
how did I get here?
Yeah, everything. So yeah, I do hope for that to happen soon. Like I said, this meeting was a lot of kind of housekeeping and just kind of get the gears going initially. But
Awesome.
Great question.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, I will just kind of wrap up with just a couple more thoughts. I imagine that we've all had the experience of being part of a group that was not high functioning. And so it bears kind of discussing kind of what makes a highly effective group. Collaboration. I mean, the fact that you're all sitting here with a fund that we have today, it like makes you kind of pros at kind of working through challenging conversations. So, but just focusing on collaboration with each other, with staff, making sure that you're following, and we'll follow up with links, our code of conduct, and maintaining a professional workplace, discrimination and harassment-free workplace. These are all things that, of course, you would expect to be the standards of conduct for all of you. Also, you shouldn't hesitate to speak candidly. Sometimes people feel like it's a public meeting and like, I don't know. You can be candid and respectful. And if you find yourself feeling like you don't get to put your voice out there, because you feel like it's, not supported, or because the culture is not safe, that is a flag for you to have a conversation with Andy and Sarah. Right? We want this to be a place where you all can have your voice be heard, that you can feel respected even when you don't agree. I always love to say, like, if you get to the point where like you and another member who you often don't land in the same place, but if they're not there, you can say, well, if so-and-so was here, I think, so you actually know each other so well that you can reflect on where they might be coming from, even when they're not there. Those are good places to be as a group. Just number one thing, strong communication really will support effective governance by all of you in terms of this fund. I like to kind of call it the no surprises approach. It works both ways. We will try not to surprise you on things. And if you could be thinking about, oh, I probably should let Andy know this, where there might be surprises that we should be aware of. Keep in mind that any written communication is a matter of public record in Oregon. And so just be thinking about kind of the tone and appropriateness. And again, it's embarrassing to even be saying these words when I look at kind of the professionals and the experience that we have in this room, but just always good reminders. And again, we already talked about kind of group emails. You'll notice that when Andy and Sarah are emailing you, it's always blind CC. And that's intentional so that you can't accidentally reply all. And then next thing you know, you're in a serial communication. So we will do things to try to make it so you don't even have to worry about it. But anyway, so these were really just kind of level setting some of these things. And I hope to be on your agenda in the future where I get to be like fun and like doing cool stuff with all of you. So don't hold this against me. Okay. That's it. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Appreciate it. Do we have any questions before we move on for Debbie about any of that presentation? I really appreciate the time, open communication. I think that's what I told all of you, especially when it comes to any work, don't hesitate to reach out. Any questions? You're not going to annoy me. I'm probably going to annoy you more than you annoy me with emails and phone calls. But really, don't hesitate. I know we're going to go into the chair and vice chair and then go into a break. Before we do that, though, we're going to talk a little bit about the budget. So Sarah was going to chat about that with a few requests. So I thought we'd throw that in right now. Then we'll go into this for our first business, and then we'll go into a break. Hope that's okay. Sarah, hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So this is a little bit off the cuff. We've had only just a little bit more than 24 hours with the governor's recommended budget, and Shannon Hearn and our director's office has been very busy combing through that and sense making of what carried forward in terms of policy option packages or requests from the agency requested budget into the governor's recommended budget. And what we know at this point is that private forest accord was identified as priority in the governor's budget. Our policy option package 105 was what we had put forward in the agency requested budget. And of that, what ended up getting included in the GRB is a somewhat reduced amount. So the governor's budget calls for 10 million in general fund and then 12 million in other funds expenditure limitation. So that's sort of just permission to spend the money that we have. So as you all probably know from your conversations with Andy, we do have 10 million in the account now, which we were given as part of the original bills in the 2022 short session. And then next biennium would be this additional allocation of 10 million general fund. And then this will be the first calendar year of the tax revenue, which will bring 2.5 million a year until the incidental take permit is signed. Did I have that wrong, Heath? Was this the first calendar?
I'm trying to recall, I remember specifically a conversation about retroactive application of the harvest tax. And so
Okay.
I had expected you would already have reps.
Don't believe we do, but I do have that on my to-do list to follow up with our budget staff to get clarity on that. So we'll have that for next time. But essentially, in terms of the GRB, it's that 10 million general fund for deposit into the mitigation sub-account. And then permission to, it becomes other fund then. And so that limitation that we're given is just the ability to spend down those funds. Versus what was in our request, which was 20 million, so that it would be the 10 million annual that was called for in the author's recommendations or the PFA author's report. So
Do you need an expenditure limitation for the harvest tax revenues for the 5 million per biennium? So that is to say, shouldn't it be 15 million expenditure limitation?
I think we will need an expenditure
Yeah.
limitation. So
that's coming from somewhere else. I'll have to follow up with budget.
Yeah, these are hard. When I met with Andy, my suggestion to him was that he become an expert in ways and means and appropriations issues. It's actually a pretty hard area to lobby.
well, this area is especially difficult because, you know, I think people are still trying to figure out how and when some of these revenues are going to come in.
Yes.
You need a expenditure limit for the rollover portion.
We have that, well, I guess we'll have to.
We have that in
request
our base
that again.
budget, right? We already have that in our base budget. And
We have expenditure limitation that for this 10 million, but I believe we have to re-request it next biennium. That may be what this 10 million is for. The way it worked, since we were given the funds, is we were quarterly asking for additional limitation because we were unclear how quickly we were going to get money out the door. And so I think there's an understanding with the Legislative Fiscal Office that we will be sort of incrementally coming back to increase that limitation as we get closer to needing to spend significant chunks of it.
And what do you feel like is your authority? I'm sorry, did you?
I just was trying to get some clarification because there was a $10 million initial tranche given with when the PFA agreement passed. Understanding is some of those funds have been used for Andy, for example. No.
No, so there's a separate pot of money to pay for the 2 administrative staff associated. with
Okay,
it.
great.
That does not come out of the grant.
Super. So there's the grant fund of the 10 million. And my understanding is that was to be carried over.
Yes, it carries it.
Yeah, and so, and now there's another 10 being put forward in the governor's budget.
Correct.
So there's 20, and then there is another 5 at least. Yeah, from industry. So that's 25. So it feels like, I guess what I'm trying to say, if that full amount of money is going to come in that biennium, although I'm very skeptical we'd be able to get up to speed and spend this. I have hope. Yeah, maybe we can. But, yeah, well, that I want to make sure there's authority for the agency to actually be able to spend that much money. So anyway, I'm not as familiar with what the different terms mean in terms of what you're authorized to spend, et cetera. But I guess that's be great to check in on that and help us.
I think that what we can do is follow up because honestly, we really are trying to sort out all of these details. Maybe what we can do is have our budget folks just put together a nice table for you, Sarah, that you can share with everybody with the details.
We can certainly do that.
Just coming in, which source, what did
In when,
What?
right?
Yep.
And making those harvest tax payments.
Yeah, well,
One pitch I might make to you guys too, and I don't know how it works with your relationship with the governor, but it would be really good, I think, if that 20 million could roll up into the continuing service level of the next biennium. That is to say, my hope is that this would not be a repeating POP scenario. When the state and ODF and W was funding this fund, it would be great if that 20 million per biennium were at a CSL level. And I appreciate the governor may have only put another 10 million in for this next biennium, but at least that I think you could argue should be a part of the CSL.
Well, we have been arguing that from the outset because we were quite surprised that it was not and that we had to put a pop in.
Yep.
So, we'll continue to share that message, but yeah, but I mean, I think as it was put in, it was not put in as permanent base, but that's something we'll have to keep going back for.
Yeah, I think, well, I just don't want it to be a perpetual pop that we have to fight for session after session, so.
I hear you.
Yeah, and maybe, and neither do you, right? You don't want to be burning your capital on, there'll be other things that may be a priority, obviously, as well for the agency. So, anyway, I'll look forward to hearing back from where we are now, so we get some clarity, but.
Yeah, we'll get a visual
Great.
for you all.
And I think
That's easy
this
to do.
will be an area where I'm making clear that I'm not speaking as a member of the committee, but as instead a participant in the PFA group. Me too. About expectations. So, yeah.
Go get it, people.
Okay, I mean, that's really all I had on the journey. There's obviously a lot more in the budget that we're sifting through right now. That's pertains to this.
Do we have any other questions? Thoughts or points of discussion
One
for
more
the budget?
clarification. So there's two positions then that are funded outside of this.
Yes, okay, so back to your
And is
question about
that
what comes out of the
service?
fund. Andy and the staff assistant, we are still in recruitment, are two positions that we have permanent funding for. It does not come out of the grant subaccount. Other administrative costs that we may incur will come out of the grant subaccount, and those are eligible as a statute. So things like we have a definite need to build a grant system. Contracting the development of that system and maintaining it over time is an administrative cost that would come out of it. When there are Department of Justice reviews of our grant templates that we're building, our contracts when we get into solicitations, those will come out of the fund as well. If there are other contracts that we all collectively decide are worthwhile, for example, if we wanted to bring in a third-party facilitator or consultant to help with some aspect of startup or some aspect of strategic planning in the future, that's the type of thing that would also come out of it. We have an eye toward minimizing those administrative hits to the fund. Obviously, we want to keep it as full as possible so that we can put it toward projects on the ground. But that is what was given to us for positions, his very, very minor spending budget that he has associated with his position. It's those administrative costs like that, those big administrative costs that would have to go.
Thank you.
Likely higher in the initiation of just getting frameworks built, getting systems built, and then tapering off.
With the exception of like DOJ sort of routine review of really large, I mean, we're talking about putting out really large projects, and so they're just automatically gonna have a DOJ review. Let's know it. And so that'll be ongoing, but a lot of it is upfront startup cost, I think.
Yeah, in agreement. And it's stuff that streamlines the process too. Yeah. Great. Any other questions, thoughts on the budget? How it's arranged? Before we move on. Perfect. Good conversation. Thanks, Debbie. Sarah, ready to do.
Do the break and do chairs after?
Up to you guys, do you want to do the chair? Chairs? All right, let's go start. I like it. All right, well, let's move on to business now with it, right? Well, too far behind here. So I talked to most of you, actually all of you, talked about chairs, vice chairs, some of you are new. So I'm just gonna real briefly kind of go over what it means to be in one of these offices as a chair or a vice chair. We're kind of going to a discussion after that, if there is any. We're going to nominations and then a vote. That'll be kind of a first order of business. So I kind of walk you guys through that, what that looks like for motions and everything, which many of you probably already know, but bear with me. We're just gonna get through it. So, you know, it's a 2-year term to be a chair, right? The vice chair supports the chair. They're there essentially for absence of the chair for the most part. But really a chair, you know, they should have experience in past committee
hopefully, past committee experience. You know, especially something in the industry would be great, either or, you know, conservation, timber industry. Ability to create agendas, to manage, right? Facilitate and delegate at meetings. That's really important. They are gonna have an expectation to work with me before meetings to create agendas, right? Items, where are we gonna meet? How are we gonna meet? So really that high level strategic planning, especially in this first few formative years of the committee, right? It's gonna be a big role. And we're gonna be working a lot together. They have to be able to help the group stay on focus, on path as we're going through meetings. Know when to table conversations, when to go longer than not. You know, and of course, last, you know, comfortable with public speaking and, you know, mediation and confrontation, right? That's just what's gonna happen. We got great opinions here and we got passionate individuals here across the whole aisle. So there's gonna be debates. They have to be comfortable with that, facilitating those debates. And then of course, there's some more, what it is, two-year term initially. So that being said, any questions, discussion points on it before we go into nominations? Pretty straightforward what it is, I would imagine.
How many years do we have?
So yeah, each member has their own amount of years. So there's, let me pull it up right here, actually. And I can read that to each of you.
Here. And 3. Oh, great.
Here we go, guys. Just voting right now. And actually, I'll just pull it over into the screen real quick.
That would be good.
Okay.
Ooh, can you blow it up?
Oh, yeah, you guys can't see that, huh?
I know. My eyes cannot see that.
Sorry, let me see how to navigate. I think I'm getting to the plus arrow over there, right?
Yeah.
Slowly.
Chad is one.
This is why I need this on this. Yeah, I spelled it totally wrong.
All right, so let's read it real quick, but, so again, just to remind everyone, Chad, we got 1 year, Kristen, we got 3 years, Bob, we got 2 years, Fran, 3 years, Keith, 2 years, Andrew, 1 year, Mark, 4 years. Ex officios are indefinite, on behalf of their office, right? So as long as they hold that position or whatever. That's like,
I thought I was 1 year.
I thought I was 2.
Oh, no.
this, we'll double check this, but this is as much as I have from my documents.
That might be what we requested and not what we were.
So
Let me look that up on Workday.
That's important to consider. Like for a 1-year term, it was my understanding that you could then be placed for a second.
Yes, so you can do 2 terms as a member, max 2 terms. And then in your second term, we roll over into 4 years by default.
Right.
Can we nominate somebody for one of these 2-year positions who has a 1-year term presently anticipating being re-upped?
Nothing would prevent you from doing that.
Yeah, I don't think so, because, I mean, they're governor appointed, but it's recommendation to the governor. I don't think anything would. Yeah, we'd address after that 1 year and assume that you will get reappointed to the position. Let me make a note though, so I'll confirm these and resend it out to you guys.
Do we need that confirmation before we vote on chair?
I mean, I think going after what he just,
I think I'm comfortable. That will be the case.
Because we could take a break and get that figured out.
Yeah. I mean, I think the wrinkle would be if a 1-year person gets appointed to one of these, then it's really up to the governor to reappoint. Or the person doesn't want to do it, right? So if the person either drops out, then obviously they wouldn't be,
we go to a new.
and, you know, we'd have to get someone else, or if the governor didn't reappoint, then obviously we'd have to.
So I mean,
What you want to think about is just make sure you don't do a chair and vice chair that both have 1 year.
That's what I was thinking.
Because if someone chose not to be reappointed, you'd still have your vice chair for that kind of transition and.
That's a very good point.
continuity. But again, if you think the longer you're all staggered like that, you're gonna always have that element, and it may be someone who's about to be reappointed, who is your longest serving member, and you want the benefit. We wouldn't want to eliminate them for consideration just because they only have a year left before they get reappointed. So just some ways to think about it.
And things happen with life too, people, you know, transition.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can forecast them.
All right, so we're in agreement that we will move forward right now with nominations and election for it. Do you have any other questions on it?
Status as ex officio, Plan 2, whether you can serve as chair.
Doesn't say you can. Bills. As far as I'm aware, but you know, there was some, I forget if there was a recommendation that possibly an ex officio is one, but I didn't see anything in it as far as my notes go.
Anything with that? That's interesting. What an interesting.
And I have the bills here, but
I think OWEB has one that you would know better than I, but isn't one of the OWEB chairs and ex officio.
Barbara. Chair.
Yes, she's from the.
Yeah, Barbara. Barbara, ex officio.
Well, cool. That's good. Just knowing kind of how it's been done elsewhere. Yeah, that's helpful.
yeah, I didn't see anything there that said it shall elect a chair. But you know, what, in the meantime, let's take a break. I'm gonna read the bill real quick again and double check that. Because I know exactly where it is in the document. So let's take a 15-minute break. All right, does that sound good? We'll be back here at 2:40. All right, guys? All right, thank you.
Okay, here's what I showed on.
We're gonna wait just a minute. About 2 minutes.
I love this generic cool ranch. It's glacier.
I saw that. Exactly. So we're just waiting for Mark to be able to get back here. So just another minute. Sorry about that, guys. We can actually have.
No, not really the same.
Really down by me.
Yeah, like the round.
Oh.
I think it's still.
RTA.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, like, there's no stagger.
Right. Yeah.
I,
That big conflict with that.
Think so?
Yeah.
I haven't done that. It might be.
yeah. No, that makes sense. I know, it'll be fine. Yeah. Me either. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. Like, very good.
It's in the hallway.
Yeah, or we could go ahead and start without him.
I mean, I guess.
Perfect. Wait, is that, are those the terms? Those are the terms.
And you might realize.
Does that not match?
I think it does. Well, I don't know, like, that's just.
All right, guys. We'll get back to the meeting here. It's unmuted, right? Yep. All right, perfect. So yeah, these are the updated terms we have as of now. Anything seem different,
Seems correct.
correct?
Wow.
It's like we're having.
4 years. But you're in here for a while. Don't worry about it.
So Andy, this is Andrew. Are you able to read those off? Because we're not seeing
Yes.
those on.
Yes, thank you about that, Andrew.
Yes.
Bob, 1 year, Chad, 1 year, Kristen, 2 years, Keith, 2 years, Fran, 3, Andrew, 3, Mark, 4. Mark, your default 4. Bill, by the way, that's how it worked out.
And then, once the authors cycle off, subsequent participants will all be 4-year
Yep.
terms.
This is just a way to make sure that everyone doesn't cycle off this week.
Right, and that we
Oh,
benefit from, the, the legacy of all that work that you guys did ahead of us.
yeah, expertise. So,
Did I hear you correctly that if someone is re-upped, they're automatically 4-year term regardless of the first term?
yes. And I quite literally stand corrected about the chair and vice chair and ex officio. They cannot be a chair. So just read the bill.
What's that?
Only the voting members can be chair or vice chair. So, which is here. And we got Andrew. So at this point, for the chair, a point of discussion, I would want to bring up again, if you have anything that people would like to discuss about the chair, what the role, who should maybe fill the role or whatever. Anyone want to bring anything up?
I'd like to just bring it up for discussion, not for any kind of formal motion or anything, but I do think that it's a good look and likely helpful for the success of the committee to have the chair and vice chair positions held by timber and conservation. So especially around issues around decorum or preserving order, if anything does get contentious, it avoids kind of a power dynamic of silencing voices. If those two offices are held in two separate camps, if you will. Even though we're all in the same camp, but just for consideration.
No, I think that's.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea. I think it's kind of inherent thought that way too, but it's a great form of discussion on it. Any other thoughts or points of discussion before we go into nomination? All right, for chairs, you can self-nominate. Do we have any nominations for the chair? And then we'll move on to the vice chair after.
I would like to nominate Bob Van Dyke to be the chair.
Bob, do you accept?
Yes, I would note that I just have a 1-year appointment, so if I am not and I guess I plan, unless I have some very awful experience or something else intervenes, or the governor thinks otherwise, to myself for another term, so.
So you accept it nonetheless.
Yes, I do want to accept it.
Perfect. Great. Do we have any other nomination for chair? All right, great. So how this process is going to look, we're going to do a motion to vote. We are then going to vote by roll call, and I'll explain that real briefly here for you guys. And then we will adopt that, and then we'll move on to the vice chair. Same exact process. So could I get a motion to vote on Bob for being the chair? And you're going to state your name and a statement of purpose, such as such and such votes Bob to be chair, or
Make a motion, and you're gonna elect a motion to elect Bob as chair of this committee.
to vote.
Yeah.
Perfect. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Kristen seconds the motion. Perfect. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
So no roll call. Great. Aye.
Perfect. Motion carries. Now we're just, since it is official position, we are going to do a roll call vote. So what that means is we're going to go down a list. Sarah's going to call out the name for the voting members. You're going to give the affirmative of aye or the negative as a nay that you do not support the vote. So did you want to read the roll call voting members?
Yes. Chad Washington,
Aye.
Kristen Riviere,
Aye.
Bob Van Dyke,
Aye.
Fran Cafetera.
Caparetta, you got it.
Cafetera, okay. Keith Curtis,
Aye.
Andrew Perky,
Aye.
Mark Stern.
Aye.
All right, perfect. Could you read that? Just the tally of ayes versus nays?
Yes. For ayes, it is Chad Washington, Kristen Rivard. Sorry.
That's okay.
My last name's Sapienza, so you think I could. Bob Van Dyke, Fran Cafetera, Heath Curtis, Andrew Perky, and Mark Stern for yay.
Perfect. No nays. Can I get a motion to adopt the vote?
Oh, no, please.
Chad Washington and I move to adopt the vote.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Fran seconds. All righty. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the motion carries. So Bob is now the chair of the committee. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the vice chair. Do we have nominations for a vice chair?
I would like to nominate Chad Washington as vice chair.
Second.
Chad, do you accept?
I do.
Perfect. All right, sounds good. We will now move into a motion to vote. Can I get a motion to vote?
I move that, Pete Curtis, move that we vote for Chad Washington for vice chair, and I vote yes.
Get there. I know it's a process, guys, but for our offices, we got to go through it. Can I get a second?
Second, the motion to vote.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the motion carries. We're going to do roll call. Sarah?
All right, can't watch. Okay. So Chad Washington. Both. I just say yes, right? Is it? Because everyone said yes. Okay. Okay. Kristen Riviere,
Aye.
Bob Van Dyke,
Aye.
Fran Cafetera,
Caparetta.
Caparata. There we go, Caparata.
Aye.
Keith Curtis,
Aye.
Andrew Perky,
Aye.
Mark Stern.
All right, perfect. Last time, can I get a motion to adopt the vote? Vice Chair.
So moved.
Yeah, there you go.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Great, the motion carries. All righty, we have Chad as our vice chair. All right, guys, thanks. I'll be setting up a meeting with you guys shortly after. We'll be getting forward with business.
Yes, since we did that unanimously, so then we're off to a good.
Yeah, very much so.
Already collaborated with it, right?
We did, and we also unanimously dismissed Debbie Colbert's advice with the 2 1-year terms, but I think that will be able to pick that.
Yeah, yeah.
I just really want to say that I appreciate your willingness to step up into those chair roles and, we've got a lot of work in front of us, but I think I know you all are already wrapping your heads around what it will take to build it. So just really appreciate that. I know you're very busy. Bob, maybe you're less busy
Little less busy.
now. Probably not that much less.
No, it's not built itself.
We're trying to fix that.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
All right, guys. Well, now we're getting to the part where we're going to start having that dialogue between us. So we're going to understand what the goals are of this committee, of everyone here, right? The mission. Before we get into that dialogue, that brainstorming, which is just really a start, right? We're far from the end of it, but it's just to get the gears moving, shifting in your head. I'm going to talk a little bit at you about building the foundation and what the MAC is, right? The Mitigation Advisory Committee. Many of you do know this already. We've talked about this. We got the 4-year terms, right? We have a diverse committee in front of us, right? We also have ex officio to help advise this committee. And what is the role of the committee, right? It's in our name. We're an advisory committee, the ODFW mission, right? The goal here is to solicit applications, get our RFPs out, and get money out the door for mitigation in private forests to help. Right, the highest public benefit. Right, these are kind of our top goals, and you're going to leverage the PFA funding and whatever other funding we can secure down the road. So how can we define success for this program? That's something that I've been thinking about. I've had conversations with all of you. I've asked all of you what success means. We're going to have that same exercise again in just a minute here, what that looks like. And luckily for us, it's somewhat broad, right, for the mitigation. The mitigation program is a sliver of this whole PFA effort. And you may know, as many of you will learn as we give more background on the entirety of the PFA program. But it's an important sliver. Don't let that be downgraded. It's kind of like that Goldilocks scenario. Right? It's the fun part, it's the fairy tale of the PFA. We get money on the ground, we get to be impactful locally and make change, right? It's resilient in the private forest. So, success is, this is what I pulled from the state bill, what I pulled from the PFA report. It's putting some stuff in boxes, but again, it's broad. You really get to work together to create this pathway forward, what that looks like. So some projects are in-stream flow benefits, right? That's stuff that would be. We'll look at beaver restoration, right? That's another big effort. Beaver's on the front of our PFA report. Okay, then I've already gotten some beaver interest from the community members, right? Wanting to get involved. We have projects that, restoration, the biggest thing, right? That's what we're going at, our mitigation. Right, these are just some examples of what it is. So I've asked all of you guys in our meetings what it looks like to be successful. What does a successful program looks like to you guys? Right, because that's why you're all here, to help define, build this foundation, and grow the program. So this is a word cloud. Bigger the word, the more I heard it from each of you, from everyone at this state table, right? One of the biggest things is landscape, impactful funding across the landscape. You guys want to see change. And I think that's something we've kind of revolved around in the intro, looking at resilience, landscape. You want to act local, you want to do mitigation, really digest what this means, because I think it really shows that you're all here for the same goal at the end of the day. I love these word clouds, because it really just draws that line of collaboration across the aisle, what it looks like at the end of it all. It's going to have to be a meaningful and impactful program for fish capacity mitigation. An experiment at the bottom. It's a small one, but it is an experiment at the end of the day. Right? You guys are helping guide that, what that experiment looks like at the end. So, I'm hoping at this point, we can kind of chat a little bit about mission and goals and what it looks like. This is just kind of an open discussion. There's no right, there's no wrong answers. I just want us to get used to start collaborating with each other and respect each other's visions and opinions. So off the bat, how would you define a successful PFA grant in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Mark?
Well, just an initial question. I don't necessarily think that would be an answer, but I just wonder from the authors, was there sort of a needs assessment that went into, led to identifying the different mitigation categories, or any thought of, you know, there was a dollar amount that was proposed or agreed to like that fulfill that need, or curious on your thinking that sort of led to.
Great question.
Got us go ahead.
They know, you know, there wasn't really needs assessment nor much precision around the dollar amount there. I mean, I think there was a sense that the goal of the negotiation was to get a habitat conservation plan, that there would be effects from ongoing forest practices. There would be some arguably from it, and that having a mitigation fund that was a real fund would be helpful to getting the take permit. That's just speak for myself here. I would offer those thoughts up. I think there was also recognition that because of the species in question and their wide ranging habitats, that just having only private forest lands be the focus for mitigation activities may not be the best way to go. That being able to deal with projects that were even off private forest land that provided substantial improvement for salamanids in watersheds with private forest land would be worth considering. I think, you know, I don't know that it's on services, right? You may, our ex-officio members may be able to speak to this, but when you start getting down toward the end of, you know, of eliminating your impacts, of eliminating incidental take, it starts getting incrementally very expensive. And so then the question becomes, you know, how can you more efficiently mitigate those impacts than maybe just doubling down on the conservation measures you've already identified? And this is not an uncommon way at the end to say, all right, if you do these things and you're able to help fund other, you know, investments in conservation, then we're going to call it a good job. I think that helped get it across the finish line. And, you know, there's kind of more you could tell about the story. And what my wisecracks earlier probably like breached, you know, some of our non-disclosure covenants to one another in that process. But I would say, just generally speaking, as Bob says, it was not terribly precise.
Oh, that's great.
Very good insight. So what would we want to have a successful PFA? What does that look like, a PFA mitigation program?
I think one of them is 4 years. I think one of them is spend all the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would encourage our ex officio members to participate in this conversation too. I'd really like to hear from you on what success looks like from your standpoint.
And I would just add well to spend all the money at the end of that.
Yes, fine, fair enough.
That transparency, making sure that it's very clear where the money's going.
We all got a good lesson in transparency earlier today. Definitely, you know, what that looks like to be a part of it.
I think tracking and accounting is part of it. And monitoring, which is always the hard thing to fund, but monitoring efficacy of the investments.
So when you talk about monitoring, I know you're used to well restoration, but what do you mean by that?
I think it has to be thoughtful, but some capacity to understand if the projects you're investing in are resulting in the outcomes you intend.
Let's make meaningful. Speak of that.
Effectiveness monitoring of projects. So effectiveness monitoring as opposed to compliance, whether they did them right.
Both, I guess.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
That's a good point. I mean, it's one thing just check a box for monitoring, but did that actually happen? You know, I mean, plenty of us come from a grant world where I can check a box and say, yeah, I completed that restoration for 50 to 100 acres. It's great. But in 10 years, is that still there?
And project monitoring too, right? So making sure that the percent spend down on the allocated fund is also kind of in line with percent completion of what they say they're.
Right, that's what kind of what I think of as compliance monitoring.
Yeah.
And the effectiveness monitoring, I think, well, most of us have been around grant programs long enough to know how difficult that is. So that'll be a real challenge to determine what does success mean in terms of effectiveness.
was there any language in the codes to effectiveness monitoring and any like max amount of the total dollars available that could go toward its effectiveness monitoring?
I don't believe so. There is language about reporting back to, is it to the legislature?
Yes,
that you report back to? So I think you would have to have enough information to fulfill, or it would be my read as a.
And that's part of the, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the right thing, because we do have, so when I said effectiveness monitoring, I meant of these specific projects. Do have a whole separate group that's doing depth management and effectiveness monitoring of the new rules that are essentially the HCP conservation measures. So that's happening. And I was thinking more projects. Yeah. Okay, just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, there isn't any specific language in the report or in the bill saying this much will go toward, this much goes towards planning, this much goes towards monitoring. That's where your guys' expertise, we get to work together and bring that, right? And that's unique. How many times do you apply to a grant, you get funding, and you only got the implementation side of it, or whatever that looks like. You only got half that help that you can get A to Z. That stuff really makes it a successful and impactful project across the landscape. We're not funding, we probably will fund small, but a lot of this is gonna be big effort, right, to get the money out the door.
We want to make sure that writing the check isn't the end of the process, that there's follow-up. As they're spending that down, we're keeping track of, again, project monitoring and making sure that those percent completions are kind of in line with the percent spend down.
Yeah, and part of that, and even going back to the biennial report, we were talking about a grant management system. We're looking into one that streamlines and is efficient in that monitoring, where the applicant can upload stuff into a portal. We pull that for the report, and we're able to create this data like you were talking about, and be able to pull it. It's important to prove it, right? We want a good report card at the end of the day.
Is there a match requirement?
That's up to us.
Unless you decide you want there to be one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any
All of
opinion on that? I mean,
These are all these mini decisions that we're going to need to make over the coming year. What percent of money can go toward monitoring? And what sort of, does match a requirement, or does it get you extra points? And those are the types of things where we're already kind of starting to tally some of those little mini decisions, and would likely bring forward sort of straw men for your consideration, or, drafts for your consideration. But we've also been meeting with other grant programs and other granting agencies to understand how they've done it. For example, OWEB just went back and revised their rules because they found that there was sort of I don't want to call it a statute of limitations, but that's what I'm going to call it, in terms of how long you can keep asking a grantee to go back and monitor their site.
Right.
And sometimes effectiveness doesn't show up until 5 to 7 to 10 years later. And so there's going to be, it's not, some of these will be tricky decisions.
And
Yeah, I think funding being
that problem, right? We don't want a lack of the ability to find a match to be a hurdle, and maybe if we don't have a match requirement, then these funds could work on projects where other match required grants can't.
Also, this could be strange.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking more along those lines, that if that's a hurdle against a bigger project, to me, that's an efficient use of this money. Is pairing it with other monies. This can be the match and get bigger projects.
Even for federal and state dollars.
Match is a demonstration of
I would
partnership.
term that,
Right.
That is a good point, that match is a demonstration of partnership. It could be extra credit though in this one at the end of the day too, where you get 100 points. If you have match, you get 105.
One option to consider in that would be whether it's match or leverage, because you can maybe demonstrate partnership through showing leverage without the same rigors of the requirement, just as a.
I was gonna say leverage funding and leverage outcome.
You talk a little bit more about.
Well, leverage outcomes could be, there may be a project we all agree is great for anadromous fish, but it also happens to benefit the municipal water supply for some coastal cities. So I think those kinds of synergies are just really important to take advantage of.
Boy, help me, do you anticipate that this is going to be like points-driven process. I have never actually participated in anything, so I've never even applied. And so this is pretty new to me. That strikes me that it could result in some awkward outcomes where the points are gamed, but it's not necessarily the most attractive proposal.
So I mean, that's part of the decision of this committee. Now, most granting, how it does go is a score and an arbitrary rank, right? Because that's how we prove there's no favoritism in it. We're able to score and rank it, but we can have different levels of what those reviews look like. Who gets to rank and what that ranking is and what that point system is.
Technical merit also.
Yeah,
Maybe we could make a ton of money, but if it's not a good proposal or a good project.
Yeah,
well, like an example from my perspective, like the Wild Salmon Center has built like business plans for like all these watersheds. We could like rebuild all of that work. Or I just feel like, you know, there's been a lot of really smart thinking on where and what kind of investments are best. I would hate if we built a point system and got to the end of it and like some little rinky-dink thing over here was getting funding when we all agreed after a lot of process that this other one was better, right?
Yeah, and that's where the kind of questions really matter, right? And how we do the ranking. It really can come down to tailoring it, so we do capture that stuff. And you know, that's something I was going to talk on the timeline, working on that to present a draft. But yeah, in agreement, we don't want stuff to do that.
I might just add to that too. One plan that we're hoping to set in motion with your permission agreement is that we provide not only ODFW, but other agencies and stakeholder groups, watershed councils, those that have been in this business of doing these business plans and doing these landscape scale analyses to identify priorities, the opportunity to sort of present and lay those out, because we think that that'll likely inform, you will have the ability to design your request for proposals in a way that may specifically target those priorities. So you say, hey, everybody, we're putting out our next round for of funding for grants. We specifically are looking for projects that are either in these geographies or that are addressing these conservation priorities. And so you have some front end like guidance that you can do to make sure you aren't getting things that are just way out in left field. And then, yeah, and then the way Andy's already been playing around with these amazing flow charts that he'll show you in next meeting or the one after that of potential processes for how we can review grants. Who does it? Technical reviewers that are doing their own really objective scoring, opportunities for the MAC to do its own ranking. And so like, that's a great question, and all sort of what we're trying to chart out as what's to come in our subsequent meetings from here. But I think the restoration priority component of this or the conservation priority component of this will be fun to have people come in and sort of lay out for you all what is sort of known in these collaborative spaces as the restoration priorities or the conservation priorities. And then tying it to the HCP.
And friendly amendment, I would say the other alternative is that one of the questions is for the applicant to highlight how this project fits into existing prioritizations.
And that's the other way you can get at
it from either.
I will follow you down what sounds like a relatively bureaucratic path, as long as you promise me that we can do it efficiently and quickly.
It is, and it's important because, as Kristen was just saying, when we have questions on there and say, what local plans are you empowering? What local and regional plans? And then having a local NGO or reviewer on the ground, like a forester from ODF or whoever, review it, right? To look at that merit. And then we can also request presentations, right? Or people can come and say, I want to present in this region on what's going on. So we have a thumb of what's happening, right? So there's a whole myriad. It's not, I don't think bureaucracy would be the right word to say, but it's just how we can highlight how they can work to get it done.
I'm swimming in bureaucracy. I don't even know.
So
that's actually, that RFP is really our high level filter.
It is. You know, that is what we do our priorities in, is to say how we're going to spend it for this option, right? We're going to do a yearly solicitation.
By having a scoring matrix or a rubric, we're also able to better provide feedback to applicants that were
At
not
the end,
successful.
yes, because those who aren't successful will request and say, why did I not get funded? And we will follow up with comments from the reviewers, and we have to show them open door policy, why they did not get funded. We have to prove it beyond a reasonable.
So address what Pete's concerned about. One, we don't want a bureaucratic process that takes forever, because highlighted and underlined, we gotta spend money.
Yep.
And we really don't want to spend all of our time in reviewing and finally selecting when we've missed, whole windows of potential funding.
Great.
Gotta
Yeah,
have money.
and projects and in water work periods, right? Stuff where we have to hit these windows for stuff to be impactful and get change on the ground. Bob?
I think related to that, one of my goals is that there be efficient administration. And so this is more at the ODW level, that we not spend too much on administrative costs. And that we also, I think we're not gonna be well served by giving out a ton of small chunks of money.
But I was like literally raising my hand to be able to say, I want to make sure that there's an avenue for people to ask for money if they're not a massive project, like a small Woodland donor.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I guess like if we gave, it'd be like a lot of $20,000 grants to administer if we gave that many out. For example, that was the size. So I guess I'm thinking about this.
I might also suggest that some of those small landowner projects are not cheap.
Yep.
Right, they're not.
Right, and so like deploying large sums of money can happen on small.
It's true, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like the mom and pop shops.
Yeah, I was just thinking more of the administrative cost that it takes to run a grant. And if you've got too many of them, then you need to hire more staff and then.
Yeah, it goes through our legal, it goes through, and then,
Yeah.
but then we got the flip side, right? We got a large grant, really large, goes through DOJ. Right, and then we got another thing. It's great points though, nonetheless.
One other thing I wanted to
Go ahead,
add on
please.
the list of success that I made, and that is ease of public engagement. So if people want to find out what's going on with this committee, where are there materials about it, how's the money being spent? To me, it's important that it be really easy.
And Andrew would like to.
Just send them to a website where
Yeah.
everything's posted. And there's just a link.
Yes.
So people could see these.
Yeah, so we have a webpage in development, and just so you guys know, I mean, my policy is open door, I'm standing here on behalf of the government, but one thing I'm involved in government is the transparency, and that's important. It also helps guide future applicants to look at past projects, how it got funded. I'm gonna talk about the webpage a little bit later, but we are developing that kind of front-facing opportunity. Andrew had a question.
And so does Mark.
And so
Yeah,
does Mark.
Just
Chris,
responding
oh,
to the earlier back and forth about scale. I mean, one thing we could flag to discuss is having a small grant track versus a large impact track.
Good point. Thank you. Great idea. Chris, and then we'll go to Andrew
Mark.
or Mark.
I guess going back to something you said, Sarah, about talking with others that, other agencies or programs that have administered grants like talking about here. I first and foremost just think of OWEB. My time on the board's new. It's been a crash course really, but I've been so impressed at how much money OWEB moves each year and how it's administered. Fine-tuned, they've been doing it for a long time. Seems like at some point here at the front end of our process, it'd be great to sit down with the director, Lisa, her deputy, maybe some of the staff, and Mark here representing OWEB staff. Probably speak to this better than I at this point, but I think there's a lot that we can learn from talking with those folks and getting some of their feedback. Here's that front end.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of conversations with them already. So when we present rules and stuff, I think you guys will be happy. I've already talked to Mark and I said, Mark, you're gonna have a lot of similarity in it, right? But again, we want to be unique, right? We want to be able to do our own thing at the same time. So we're gonna go over to, we had another question online.
Mark,
go ahead.
No, actually, yeah, probably a comment or observation, maybe a question. And it's really great to hear the conversation, the dialogue, and it sounds like we've got an incredible group of people that are putting a lot of thought into it all. I just want to back up because it's typical. You know, we immediately went to talking about success and how are we going to know when we get there. I wanted to back up a little bit to the expectations. Is this group going to develop its own mission statement and goals? And if so, I just suggest we probably adopt a vision ahead of the mission so we can align those together and then make sure the objectives are meeting. I know it's you know, mission and vision and goals and objectives and core values and guiding principles usually aren't the funnest things to do in a process like this, but they're incredibly important to have that kind of foundation, not only to help ourselves, but also to help, you know, stakeholders and constituents and applicants and other people just understand what we are and what we're trying to achieve. So throw that comment out there and then go back on to mute.
Oh, Mark, that's great. You're actually reading my mind. I have mission written on the board, right next to it, actually. So that's actually a pretty good transitional point. But before any other thoughts, but
I do have one more, and I mean, in the spirit of being candid, I mean, part of this for the timber industry is advertising the good work we're doing. And I understand like transparency, tracking and monitoring. But I genuinely hope that what we produce on an annual or semi-annual basis is a report that really shows in color and vibrantly the big investments and the positive things that are resulting from those investments. That is to say that the action reports that tells the story. I think, you know, that's a big part of the reason we're invested in this, because we think there will be a good story.
Yeah, can I just add on to that? And this may sound a bit Pollyannish, but having come of age in Eugene in the late 70s and early 80s and just really firsthand experienced so much tension that still continues today. But if we could inspire, like if we could demonstrate collaboration and community success and just inspire, that'd be awesome. I'm not saying we can, but something to keep in mind.
I love that.
I love that too.
I think we're also going to want it for, the department's going to want it when they go back to the legislature and talk about it.
Yeah, we do have an opportunity to develop a biennial report. I think it's biennial. Is it annual?
It's biennial.
So we've talked too about wanting that to, you know, to really do some amazing storytelling through that. And
Excellent.
And that won't be our only time where we'll want to do that storytelling. And so we'll be bringing in our information and education division to help us with that. And or if we collectively think that we want even grander storytelling and grander outreach, that could be considered as a cost that we're willing to assume in the program. So I think that's really good. And I just wanted to come back to this notion of be like OWEB. And I think when we've talked about this, we've said, okay, OWEB is like the Cadillac of grant programs. And we're probably looking to create something that's like a Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic, you know, not a Geo Metro or Yugo, if you remember those. I'm kind of dating myself with that one, but so we're modeling their good governance that they've created because they've been at this for a long time. But because it is a sub-account of the OCRF, there are also these opportunities to be a little bit sleeker, a little bit smaller, and a little bit more streamlined so that we don't completely overburden applicants with the process. And that's something we've heard, that's feedback of, I'm sure, Chris and others that we've received from OWEB applicants. And so I don't know where exactly that sweet spot is, but we're mindful of that.
Yeah, I would say that's important to note, the distinction being OWEB is 100 million or more biennium. This program is going to be a lot less than that, so some rationale.
And yet still the biggest for ODFW. So we do have our work cut out for us to make sure that we've got at least enough bureaucracy to hold it up.
I was going to share also on OCRF, I think in the last year we had 120 applications and we funded 40 of them. It was remarkable that even though we spread them out among the committee to rank them, the rankings were very similar. People have a feel for what was the right kind of project, and who were the strong partners, and where was the funding best organized. So it came a little cleaner than I really thought it would. I would say the one challenge sometimes is part of the OCRF proposals rankings are sort of on the quality of the proposal, so you could get a really well put together proposal for a project that didn't have as much conservation.
Exactly.
But we weighted the conservation points are nearly 50% in that scoring process, so that got to be high on that point.
It's all great thoughts and ideas, guys. Next 10 minutes, I kind of want to move on to thoughts of mission and goals, like Mark was saying. You know, what does that mean? What are the goals of this committee? What are the goals of the program? What are the mission of it, right? It's going to relate a lot to what we have on that side of the board, right? And it might be similar in some of the points, which is fine. It's okay. You know, what's the goal? I mean, oh, I'm sorry, I thought someone said something. I think that's the coffee.
Chair, something.
The chair, the coffee machine. Yeah, I mean, the goal would be, any ideas on the first goal? I can start listening to some, but
I'd like to see a goal somewhere to do with equitable, making sure, you know, to Fran's point, that we are creating opportunities for small landowners as well as the large. So something to around, yeah, equitability around access to these funds.
Andy, could I just break in with a question?
Please.
Is it envisioned that this group will, as you know, in a meeting like this, develop vision or mission or goal statements, or is it something that you and ODFW are going to bring back to us for consideration of wordsmithing, or do you envision maybe small work groups coming out of this group to maybe work on some of those products to bring back to the group? How do you see us developing those?
yeah, that's a really good question. You know, with the idea of getting money on the ground, spending it, being efficient, you know, or bring stuff to you, right? And you guys will help shape that.
I mean, we could take what we could take.
This is why we're having this
Like it's there.
This is why we're having this exercise right now, right? It's similar to the word cloud, right? When I was working with you guys on that, is to help frame it. Like I said in the beginning, you know, one of my roles is to help frame what we're all talking about, right? And that's Sarah was saying, to make it legal and what we have to do, when we can do it, how we can do it. But yeah, at one point, we will be defining that because it is important. But one of the members said earlier, it may have been Mark, applicants look for that stuff because they look at the goals and they say, do I fit in this project or in this program? Do I fit in their mission? So yeah, I would say yes, you know, we will.
A complete mitigation of the expected take of the. Yeah, fully offset will take, right? That's.
It's kind of up there. You know, I would say though, Andy, like, I don't know how much you want to redo this, what we just did, but I would encourage you and Sarah to work with your new chair and vice chair to work something up, given the language that we talked about here, and we can react to the proposals that you may have along.
That's exactly. We're gonna have retreat, hopefully too, right? We're gonna, you know, this is to help form a collaboration and partnership. And I love when people get voluntold for work too, so we can keep that coming, please, dude, please keep mentioning that. But yes, that's one of the roles.
Be happy to take what you've already provided and put together a draft and start with the co-chairs and then bring it before committee.
I think for efficiency's sake, that makes.
I think that's a great idea.
Is that a stab at a mission statement? Like what is?
This is pulled from the report. At the end of the day, it's kind of an idea to get us framing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Highlighting just the very high levels. This is not a mission statement. So just language pulled from.
Because it contains a lot of the concepts.
Drafted quickly in 8 hours. Yes.
I just want to say, I think what's covered though is really important, that in my mind, this isn't a free-form new grant making program. This program serves a very specific purpose, and so I would just encourage the mission and goals to reflect
I agree.
that purpose.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's gotta relate to the covered species.
Yes.
To start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there should be some nexus with, from my view, with the private land ownership. It doesn't have to be on private land, but it shouldn't be in a watershed that's completely owned by the federal government or something. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, private's in the name, right? For support at the end of the day. These are great ideas. Anything else before we close discussion and just move on?
I would just urge to consider developing a vision that the mission would tier to. That missions usually explain how you're going to achieve, in general terms, the vision. And so I think sometimes with just starting with a mission, there might be a piece missing. And I would just suggest that. I'm not going to throw myself on a sword for it, but at least consider developing a vision that would lead to a mission statement.
I'm fine with an exercise like that. I'd be happy to have you bring something like that to us. My experience is that it helps having those terms defined. What is the mission? What's the mission? How is it different from goals? How is it different from the mission? How are the objectives? I find like at times those terms turn into a big bush. So anyway, being distinct with what each of those categories is doing would help me.
Yeah,
assess them.
we'll include that to them.
Yeah, or feel free to leave some of them out if you don't need them.
I mean, these are pretty standard, that's a pretty standard structure for any strategic plan. And so rather than try and rattle off what I think those definitions are right now, we can do that in whatever we send to you.
Yeah, exactly. Again, this is just exercise to start thinking that direction.
That's a great.
I would be willing to help in that if that would be helpful.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Mark.
Mark, great, thanks. I love it. You guys are already volunteering for stuff. All right, guys. Well, this is great. I just want to we spent about half an hour on it. I think it was really good just to get thinking. A really good idea of what a successful grant looks like. Now we're just going to talk about a timeline, a very rough, dynamic draft timeline. I would say it's aggressive. I don't know if that opinion is shared across the committee here. But there's a lot of stuff that we need to do between now and the launch of the RFP, right? There's a lot of nuances. So I'm going to kind of go over this real quick, and then we're going to have discussion. I want to know what I did include in this timeline. What should we change? All of that kind of stuff. And already some of this stuff has changed. So meetings, right? Either every 4 to 6 weeks is what I'm thinking. We're going to talk to the chair and vice chairs to see what is efficient. How many times have you been to a meeting where you're not? Right? That's not what we want to do. We're busy. Strategic planning, we've already talked about that. That's important, right? That's why it's at one of the top of the list. Grant management system. That's something we're already working on to get demos. That stuff. We need to make sure applicants can apply from all levels. They can apply on mobile. They can apply on their desktop. It's easy to apply. We can review and streamline stuff easy. We get money out the door, but we need a grant management system that's robust to be able to deliver on that. So we're already working on getting demos and going through the process for that to promote one to you guys and see what that looks like. Draft rules. That's going to be our first thing of action in the next 6 months. So you're going to see some yellow dates here. August 4th, that's a big day. It's my birthday, but it's also the commission day. So it is a big day all around, right? We already have that date confirmed with commission. That's when we're going to present our rules. Our rules outline how we allocate funding. As we were saying earlier, it can tie our hands sometimes, so we want to be very careful with that. But it says who can spend the money and how, and a lot of other things. Go ahead.
I don't know when a RAC is required for rulemaking. Does this committee essentially serve as the RAC, or I just don't know
Not
procedure.
Not as like a formally designated RAC. Agencies can sort of choose whether they think a RAC is necessary or not.
Okay.
I was just learning this myself. ODFW typically does not have a rules advisory committee.
Okay.
And so we would be looking to use this group for that feedback I mean, there's still the public noticing and everything as with any rulemaking, but, we're
I just didn't see it on the
intending.
timeline.
Exactly, we're not
Wasn't sure if
intending
that
to
was it.
form
Okay.
a rules advisory committee.
This is,
It's working through you.
yeah, exactly. This is essentially what I've listed as that. Great question. So that's presenting in August 4th, right? That means we're going through internal reviews and we're going through you guys, we're going through public comment, all that before August. That's a big lift too, to get in front of commission and get that done, right? With a very limited time frame. Moving on through, we have
Do you want to see if there's any questions so far?
any opinions on?
Is there any way that we can try to have our RFP launch for the 1st of October? That's well outside the water work period. And I mean, if we're trying to get money out the door for projects this year, launching the RFP by December 1st, that doesn't leave a lot of time for review and approval. I mean, if our goal is to try to get some money out the door this year, that's not really leaving any room for that.
Yeah, in the process of when we, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Andrew. I was just going to ask a follow-up on that, which is what is the process and timeline from award to disbursement, just to understand that?
That's what I was thinking. I was actually about to go on that because that's a whole nother tangent, right? We have 2 months of that. Now, let's say we award, we have a review period, right, to get the grant. So December 1st, we get the grants, no one's applying. We review it, what that process looks like, a month or two, maybe, hopefully less. We then recommend it, right? We go to commission, we have to make a commission date to recommend it to commission. We have to, if it's approved, right, we then go to legal. We have legal look at it. If it's a big contract over 150,000, we then go to DOJ. DOJ has to look at it, fund it. And then it routes back into internally. We then finalize stuff with the applicant. So we're looking at a few months. I mean, I would assume, I'm sorry, you can disagree, but a quarter to get through a process.
After we've selected it.
After it's been selected, and then it moves into commission recommendation and down the alphabet. It's gonna take about a quarter to do it. And before, I know I'm putting this at the end of the month or end of the year, but we have a lot of stuff to do before it. We don't want to rush. One big thing I want to highlight, we're building for scale. We're building for impact, right? And strategic growth at the end of it. We want this to be able to be a foundation in these first few years with the assumption that we're going to leverage this funding to do really great things. And let's build it good. I want to go fast. I really do, as fast as we can. But I want to make sure we sail the ship correctly.
Yeah, I don't want to like that, Andy. It's also really important that we get the money spent. So I agree with everything that you're saying, and let's do that as quick as we can.
I agree. It's my job, my only job. So you guys are able to get, that's another benefit of it. Well,
I'm hearing you with this timeline. We close proposals December 1, we review them December, maybe into January, and there's a couple more months of administrative work to get it dispersed. This money, according to this timeline, isn't going out the door until April of 24.
But even then, it's not clear to me the pace at which you would disperse once you have a signed contract and are authorized to disperse.
They're reimbursement based, aren't they?
Yeah, reimbursement. They've got to start work, right?
So once they have a contract.
It could be months before they actually submit you an invoice for reimbursement.
So how I was gonna say how it works is once we get our last signature on that contract, which is the director's signature or whoever's signatory of the department, they can start work immediately.
Yeah, but that's like he says, not until
January,
maybe
February.
Yeah, February, March, and then.
And so, but they start in February and then yes, quarterly reimbursement. We then, they'll give us a report, what they did. We send the money out. So you're saying the money's not getting out to quarter two.
It is also interesting to me, we'll have more conversations, I guess, about this. I didn't realize that it would be a fund and reimbursement structure.
They can request prepayment.
They can't, okay, I think
Yeah,
that's.
that'll be really important for the small woodland owners that come with small grant.
So that's up to,
Working capital position or something.
Yeah, like.
so that's up to us if we can do advancements, right? And I'm for advancements. I've worked for very small agencies and companies that can't get work done, meaningful work. They don't get that advancement.
Right.
The caveat of advancements, I've been on small companies that got the advancement and didn't get done. We gotta have special reporting, right? And I'm not saying this as don't do it, because I wrote up an advancement clause in our RFP, guys. I drafted a lot of this. I am ahead of schedule. I want you to know this.
Or
I am well.
We could say, you know, a percentage prepaid and the.
Yeah, like 25% you get, right? Yeah, so that stuff, I already have it in there and I have a comment. Mac, what do you think of this? I'm all for
really
that.
helps address this equitability and access.
Yes,
Because we don't want to exclude people's ability to participate based on their access to capital.
it's important. That's the whole point of this effort.
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback. And these are all of the, like, this is all the structure we have to build together, which is why you see an October 1 launch date for the RFP. All those micro decisions that have been popping up during this discussion aren't represented on this timeline, but that's the body of work in front of us.
So the reason that this is a concern for me, and it's because March of next year gets to be June of next year pretty easily if we're not staying right on track. And with an in-water work period starting in July, they're gonna have their contractors lined up.
Yeah.
Because contractor availability isn't like, okay, I'm ready to start, I'm gonna call and we're gonna start tomorrow. So we just want to make sure that they are prepared to do in-water work.
And
for
that's,
next season.
and that's part of their application though, their timeline. They talk about how project ready they are.
Right.
And we work with that timeline too at the same.
Not from an applicant perspective, but
From us, that we're ready to
us, making
deliver on
sure
it.
That we can provide them that 25%.
So one question that this is framing for me is to what extent, and this would be a decision for the group, but to what extent technical assistance type proposals will be eligible versus project implementation? And the diagram of that might be different in the first, or the percentage might be different in the first couple of offerings. Just thinking, to your point, if you're going to be doing in-water work this coming summer, there's not just contractors, but permitting, there's a whole slew of things that have to happen. So that would probably be funds going into projects that someone started developing 2 years ago that they're trying to,
Or even-
realistically. But then there's the technical assistance, which maybe you're funding development of the designs, the permitting, all of those components. And we, as a group, will have to decide whether we're willing to invest in things in that technical assistance phase or.
Yeah. and then
Following
planning,
up on,
that's great.
Andrew would like to.
We
Yeah,
got
just
Andrew
follow-
on tonight.
yeah, following up on Kristen's comment about TA, just in the question of what it is we fund, have we done or could we do a survey of other public and private funding sources in this space and what kinds of activities they support, so we can maybe identify where there is a greater need for additional funding versus where there might be lesser need?
Good idea. As in like implementation versus planning versus.
Yeah,
technical
exactly.
assistance.
And just,
We
and
do
then
have
also-
that information from OWEB already. We'd be happy to.
Mhm.
awesome. And then that also relates to like, what could we potentially leverage? What other funding sources are out there that our efforts could leverage?
I just think like it'd be really helpful, again, and so the comments earlier, I think spend the money is a good objective and spend the money well is a separate objective. Those are both objectives that we have, but in the first objective column, like I think we need to work backwards from the end of this coming biennium, how we can deploy all of that cash on that time frame. Because as we see, if we're sitting on money at the end of it, the legislature is not inclined to give us more, right? And so they're gonna plus that up to the 20. And so I just think it'd be really good to have a strategy, not just to get contracts and projects approved, but to get money out the door so that the work is being done and funded on a biennial basis. It's gonna be hard.
And we need our,
Hard, and there may even be federal consultation on some of these.
yes, that's,
Which takes time.
we need our rules adopted too.
I just don't think the legislature is gonna let us build up $65 million in this fund because we haven't spent it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a great.
To that extent, I'm sensitive to the need to do this well and have it be successful, and just realistically building a new grant management system, even if you're using something already developed and modifying it, like those IT projects take a long time. But I'm really sensitive to what Chad and Heath are raising as well, that we need to be creating this uplift now across the landscape. is there any opportunity to invest in other state departments' programs that a subset or a portion are meeting similar objectives?
So we would provide funding to them, like what feds do sometimes to the state.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't,
I mean, we can fund other state programs. That's written into it.
well, I don't know.
That's,
And maybe that's a dumb idea. I haven't thought it through.
I don't think that's a dumb idea.
no, I mean,
Especially.
I mean, if OM has an offering that's really
No, this is-
aligned, or maybe there's still a review process to.
whatever, we grant these other agencies.
I don't know if there's an opportunity to.
Like an example I have that it may not be a good example, and I hope it wouldn't be perceived as self-serving, but like one of the things we didn't directly address in the private forest accord was stream adjacent mainline roads on forest roads, right? Where they may be spilling directly into the stream. And part of the reason for that was that there's almost nothing you could do about it short of spending huge sums of money. But the flip side of that is you can spend huge sums of money, and it is possible that we could be relocating inline roads in a manner that's very beneficial to fish, that soaks up a lot of this fund fast, without a lot of point keeping. And so I don't, again, this isn't me necessarily making the pitch that that's the most important thing. But there is a way to deploy this money quick, and that one, that doesn't necessarily require a lot of in-water permitting. And two, if you put a timber company on an engineering job to get a road moved, we can do it in a matter of weeks. We can have things happening. And so I mean to suggest that there's kind of this universe where, we go like all this. There is also actually a universe out there where we start deploying cash productively on big projects.
And Mark also has a question. He said, Andy, in the timeline adding and probably the lower priority tasks associated with recruiting and training reviewers.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole nother process, right? We gotta look at our review system. It's a great point. We gotta recruit reviewers, we gotta train reviewers. It's how we make that process from application goes from submission to acceptance and funding and who reviews it in between. We're gonna have a lot of apps. A lot. You're all busy. We're all busy people, right? And that's a whole thing we got to set up at the same time.
So I think the question being asked, I think that's a great point, Mark and Andy, and something that we can definitely add to the timeline. But I think the question, going back to Keith's points, is can we, and Kristen's, two questions, I guess. Can we direct fund projects without going through a grant process, a competitive process? And I'm not saying I have the answer to that right now, but I think that's a.
I think if they get quasi-competitive, you'd say, hey, you could have the commission adopt emergency rules in March or temporary rules in March. And you would say these are going to target big investments that are shovel ready. And that's going to be our priority right now. Submit proposals to us. And Hampton doesn't have one of these. I just want to make this clear. And submit proposals to us, and let's take a look at what we got, and we can start dispersing funds very quickly. Again, there's kind of this big kind of federal process around some of these very complicated in-water projects. But there's other productive work I think we can do quickly that actually be a thing that I think conservation interests would be invested.
Yeah, and I would hope that there are in the broader community, regulatory and landowning community, there may be an awareness of
where those are.
Yeah, where there's a chronic problem or a vital acquisition that would bring a lot of uplift if the funds were available, et cetera, where short term, we may want to try to get some of this money out the door to some of those more key projects to show results more quickly. Because I could easily see doing this really well taking a long time, right, before anything goes out the door.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Also the OCRF, the existing OCRF, which may have some capacity to step in lower.
Yeah, I think these are good suggestions. I want to take them back and discuss them with the director's office. Rather than give you my knee jerk, I have to fight against my tendency to sort of underestimate the legal and administrative requirements of things. And so I want to make sure that that is a direction we think we have the authority to go right now. And the administrative capability to go right now. But it's not, and the fact that we have OCRF is the fact that we have OWEB. I mean, there are these pass-through things if we couldn't run our own like mini RFP like you're talking about, Heath. But I'm hearing all of this. I'm taking it all in, and we'll chat about it with the director's office. Understanding this sort of need to demonstrate expenditures so that there's, motivation in the legislature to keep the fund going long term.
It would be great, short term. The advantage of a bigger project is it may have more notoriety or be sort of a marquee thing you can point to more quickly that something people have been wanting to do for a while got done.
Yeah.
Another easy way to spend a lot
Right.
of money is through conservation easements near urban growth boundaries, saying we're going to keep this as a working forest instead of opportunity for a higher, better use land sale and development in those kind of key watersheds.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, no, right. Well, there's.
I mean, like, how much exposure do we actually have on the, did you make the best choice, thing, right? Like, you're like building a lot of process to say, here was the very objective process we followed to, highlight these projects. Imagine we got a bucket full of proposals on a mini RFP and we kind of dumped through those and we all voted and said, we think these are the best ones. And none of our organizations are in any of those. Are we really, how much exposure is there that we did that wrong? It seems to me like this diverse group selecting one of those as being valuable or productive that's not grift. That's not.
Yeah, we want obviously a set of criteria in the RFP, and we want to have discussions about the application of it, but it doesn't.
Figuring like two paths of setting up this process for the long term, but we want like a flagship project to showcase the effort, the commitment, and the success of the program straight away and spend some of that money up front. I do like it. I did want to just back up to moving a road is a really big deal, and I'm not against it, but I'm also like, it wouldn't be without impact to some of our other friends on the forest, so we want to face that.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, let's plow it right through a spotted owl circle.
Let's do it.
That's a good point. We just find projects that are shovel ready that are already in development. So maybe.
But I like the two pack.
Yeah, I think this,
We were just talking over here a little bit on the side about just the NEPA part of this. I know what.
If it requires a federal permit.
Well, I'm thinking, if we can prioritize projects that don't have a need, a federal nexus initially.
Yeah.
Because eventually, hopefully, these will be covered under the incidental take permit.
Yeah.
But there's a serious capacity issue from our federal partners on helping review these, and I kind of need them for HCP stuff. So, there's definitely a concern there. So there might be some strategy here in prioritizing specifically whether it's RFP or direct projects that don't have that federal connection, just to.
And that's what we're here for. There, we do have at our disposal some really streamlined programmatic consultation instruments. Like if it triggers a core permit specifically, we can use slopes if that meets the criteria. That's a 30-day review process. You're in and out, and I can have one of my staffers look at it in a day if I have to. So we do have tools like that at our disposal. I don't know if you guys have programmatics that work the same way.
We do, for sure. And we also have the slopes.
So that's one of the benefits of having us here, I think, is as we screen these, we can say, yep, that meets slopes criteria if it triggers that permit, that kind of.
Jennifer, just quick comment. It may be worth, since you're part of the HCP, it feels like we would want the mitigation project to essentially be covered activities.
Right, we are in the way we're talking about the HCP development right now. We are talking about having mitigation projects It's basically as one of the covered activities. So we're thinking.
But the ITPs won't have been issued by that time.
Oh, that's right. Longer term.
So,
Yeah.
we have like this gap.
And so that's the recognition that during this gap kind of period, things are gonna look different than they do for
They
the
will.
duration of this project. This mitigation advisory committee will look different in year one on how we're scoring projects and what gets prioritized versus moving into the future.
Yeah, we can change stuff, as long as we don't tie our hands in the rules.
Right.
And then once the HCP gets finalized.
Yeah,
Gonna have an impact.
activity that gives you a lot of flexibility.
Well, this has been great discussion, guys. I really do appreciate it. Really good insight, opinion. Thank you for it. We're approaching the end of the meeting, 10 minutes. At this point, I usually like to open it up for additional points of conversation or what we would like to discuss at the next meeting, or ideas. This is just a list of things we have to talk about across the next year and whatever length that is. This is just an immediate list that came to my mind, right? We've talked about so much more right now. And then getting that all as much as we can sorted out and then launching an RFP, right? It's a big alphabet we got in front of us. But yeah, at this point, is there any more discussion we want to bring up? Any points for next time that we want to chat about, that we want to highlight, we want to talk about sooner? Maybe this is in no order, it's just
I
arbitrary.
think getting an answer to the direct funding question, some certainty around that. So if it's off the table, we know not to go there or, because that could speed things up regarding how we build this.
I'd also like to see the work done more around developing a vision statement and then more specific to mission and how that supports the vision and how the goals support the mission. So working with Bob and I and Mark to get that clear and get it in front of the committee so that we can have that informing the rest of our decisions.
Great idea. Great idea.
I was just gonna comment on, things with Kate that just talked about the direct funding question. I know OWEB doesn't do that much, but there is a precedent for them doing that, and most recently with 15 million pledged to Klamath River restoration. That the board voted on, and it was determined that the director had the authority to direct fund. So anyway, there is a precedence within the state agency doing that.
And that didn't come with any sort of like open solicitation on the front end. It was just, this is what it's going to be.
Direct fund.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Chris.
And you said that was OWEB?
Yeah.
Correct.
Forgot about that. Yes, so I have two things on my list, Andy, for you and I to work on, and it's this direct funding question, and then the vision, mission, goals draft for the chairs. In terms of,
I would say OCR, we have direct funded some projects.
yes, and that's where
So if you get a negative answer here, don't carry it over there.
examining our legal authority to be doing direct projects in OCRF. So that's why I'm not saying yes right now, that that's something that we'll be able to do in PF.
So again, you've got MAC operating procedures there. Is that the same as bylaws? I mean, my experiences with committees is usually there's, the rules, but then there's like the day-to-day.
How you do
Yes.
it.
Bylaws, yeah.
Orders, or what do you follow in the meetings, and are there norms of public comment and these kinds of.
Exactly what it is.
Of which there are many examples out there, but that's what you mean by the, yeah.
Yeah, and we have some forming drafts.
Andy has a draft.
That we'll be sharing and working with the chair and vice chair and stuff and get that out. Correct.
So two things. One, my hope all along with this thing was that we would not have to reinvent the wheel too much. That is to say, I would really encourage some kind of presentation from a web, like maybe if it's Mark or somebody, we could all kind of learn what they've been through. And OCRF is doing this presently, like that might be an even better analog. And so I at a future meeting, I would be very interested in kind of learning what they did. And the second thing I was going to mention was that you actually made a reference earlier, Sarah. You called them like co-chairs, and technically that's not the titles, but I'm hoping, and I can just kind of make a pitch that as you proceed, that in your engagement with Bob and Chad, that you actually kind of treated that. That is to say that you're having meetings with the two of them together and collaboratively. I think that would make me feel confident and vested about the process. And while we put some ranking in there and only one of them will hold the gavel at a time, I would hope as one member that you would engage them the same.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Chad, you're getting signed up for all this work. I love it. Anything else?
I just want to say, does the group agree on the OWEB and maybe OCRF presentations, just to get a sense for what their structures are like? Would that be valuable?
Yes, it would. I would say in general with meetings like this, to my mind, the more that can be sent in advance, that we're going to comment on or discuss or work from, I find that that's a better use of a committee's time than just sitting and watching the long presentations and then you go to the next one. So obviously there's room for presentations, but finding that balance between material in advance so people can get a briefer presentation and then do some work.
I agree.
That's a good one issue.
I have a minor request that if we could make it a bit more of a circle, I would appreciate that because I can't.
Do we need to, like knowing Mr. Van Dyke here, I feel like we may need like a motion for a page limit on advanced materials.
Well, yeah, no, we're working on the table. I put this table together yesterday. I was like, wow, we got a lot of people in the room.
That's great for you, and you get to see all of us.
Well, and
We're getting to know each other.
especially Andrew and Mark. Well, we're going to change the design of this. You all were not able to see Andrew and Mark's faces during this meeting. And so some tech fixes we've already noted for ourselves that we'll make for next time.
Of course, guys. Anything to help it. So that's gonna be a decision, right? I mean, what I envision, what I would love, we were just talking about that yesterday, you know, getting to a point where we maybe travel to where you guys are from. We have a field trip, right? Or we do virtual, right? I mean, that's up to how we want to, that's gonna be in the bylaws too. What does it mean to be present at a meeting? Sharon, that's my first thing of discussion when I talk to Chad and Bob, or is our next meeting in person, or are we gonna do virtual? This one, just, you know, rubbing elbows, that was great. But yeah.
Preferences?
If we're going to travel, I prefer to do a mix of virtual meetings and traveling to visit projects, resource sites, kind of educational field based, open to other ideas, of course.
I do like meeting in person with a Zoom option. I think there's real value to be sitting in the same room as someone side by side. But that's just not going to work out for everyone all the time. So I like the structure of hybrid meetings. But I do think that moving it, you know, maybe Roseburg or Eugene, Salem, and Portland will allow access to our meetings for the general public in a way that's maybe not the same if we just keep it in Salem all the time.
That's a great point. Yeah. And you guys talk about public engagement before.
I would also suggest that ad hoc meetings don't work very well for me on calendars. Correct. If we can schedule out as far as possible, as soon as possible, and when you do that recruiting decision, like let's like work hard. Like it's so much labor, but we all have like standing engagements already that we're going to have to try and work around not stepping on those. And I will make this a priority to shift what I can, but like that first announcement of all of the meetings, there's like a lot of pinching that comes from that. So let's try and get that done soon.
I agree.
With a lot of feedback from people in the group.
I agree.
We had a interesting discussion at the last OWEB meeting about whether to continue to do a kind of a flip-flop of virtual and in person. We finally agreed to have hybrid as an option for every meeting, given that they're public, but to really not view it in terms of the board as optional when there's a hybrid option. Like if someone can't make it, of course, they can call in, Zoom in, but really to be pretty clear, the advantages of meeting face to face. Occasionally having a virtual meeting completely, but when it is in person, that there's a strong support and advocacy for people showing up in person.
Totally.
Just for all us to get to know each other, during the meetings and a lunch and things like that.
Yeah. Perfect. Anything else before we close the meeting for adjournment?
I'd like to thank you, Andy. This is a whole lot of work. I know you've been working behind the scenes on things that aren't presented here already. Some of those you touched on when you reviewed the timeline and getting to know you and working with you in the future.
Thank
Appreciate your efforts.
I appreciate that. Mark, did you have something?
No, that's.
All right, perfect. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate the time, the communication. That's really important. You know, like I said in all of our meetings, personally, one-on-one communication, open door, talk to us. Because we don't know if you don't tell us. If you don't tell me, I'm stepping on toes, if I'm going outside the box, let me know, you know? And I think this meeting was a great demonstration. I think it really showed the collaboration that we all want. It showed the goals that we're revolving around the same idea, and it's easier to work together than it is to work apart, you know, and demonstrating that. So I appreciate the time. I appreciate the time today. But at this point, we'll adjourn the meeting at 4:01 p.m. and the next meeting date is to be determined. Bye, Chair,
See
Vice
y'all.
Chair.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Andrew and Mark.
Thank you all.
I guess. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great work.